Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna continue the series What If Deku Became the Iron Fist Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Before Momo spoke, Yaoyorozu and the others all looked at Mina for a moment, as though the girl with the pink skin had grown a new head. She crossed her arms beneath her large bust and asked, "What do you mean talk about us?" Mina grinned. Mina pointed out the invisible girl and gravity user, saying, "Well, you see, all six of us are interested in the same guy, but we're clearly not on equal footing. For instance, Uraraka here was Izuku's first kiss, and has gone on a date with him, as has Toru over there." Asui, Momo, and Jiro all turned to face the two girls, who flushed at their attention. "Is this true, Ochako?" Asui asked, feeling a little betrayed because she had assumed that she and Ochako had a special friendship, but she hadn't told her that she was dating Midoriya. This also backfired on Sue because, in her defense, she hadn't told Ochako that she had begun to feel something for the green-haired boy until after the USJ incident, and she had witnessed firsthand how determined Midoriya was to save his classmates. Knowing that she couldn't lie to her arguably best friend, Ochako turned to face Sue. "Yes, it's true, Sue." Ochako acknowledged this before turning to face Mina. "How did you know that?" she asked, aware that Izuku wouldn't speak without informing her and that they had both taken great care to avoid accidentally disclosing their predicament. Mina gave a shrug. "Well, if you're thinking that Midori told me, then you're wrong and shame on you for doubting him. I doubt even lengthy torture could get him to spill the beans, but as to how I know, it's simple. I saw you kiss him that first day of school as thanks for saving you during the entrance exam. It was really touching, and well, Toru was just too obvious. I'm sure everybody in class could see you had a crush on the guy, invisibility or not." Mina gave a shrug as Toru dug her shoe into the ground in shame. Jiro asked, glancing between Ochako and Toru, who were both staring into each other's eyes. "Wait, you're saying he's dating the two of them, and from the way they're acting you two obviously knew about each other, right?" "Yes, we know. Izuku was up front with us that he had been on a date with the other, and said he would make a decision on who to continue dating, but Hagakure and I knew it would eat him up inside to break one of our hearts, so we decided to let the sports festival decide who would be with him. Whichever one of us got the furthest, the other one would back off from Izuku," Toru said, looking at Ochako while Momo nodded. "I see, that would be the best way, taking the strain off Midoriya, who would be more likely to stop dating both of you than to make a decision. Very well, then I will also take part in this competition." Momo replied by placing her hand on her chest. "I've come to care for Midoriya very much while working beside him as his vice representative. He just has this drive about him that brings out the best in me, and I want to support him not only professionally, but personally as his girlfriend," Momo said with a blush on her face. "Guess there's no choice I'm in too," Jiro said with a confident nod. Before Mina started laughing and clutching her sides while staring at the five girls, Sue remarked, "Ribbit, I'm not going to give in either." As Mina pulled out her phone and played a video, she said, wiping an eye, "I'm sorry girls, really I am. But it's just kind of funny you think that by winning the festival you'll win him over, or that the others will just forget their feelings for him, but the real kicker is that you're all fighting over second place." She pressed the play button after saying, "I recorded this for those nights when I need a little extra to get me there." As the video started to play, the five girls gathered around Mina's phone, and as Momo turned away from the screen, their faces lit up red. Jiro yelled, "WWW, what is that?" while Mina laughed. "Exactly what it looks like, me and Izuku getting intimate. You see, I came in and made the big play while you girls were all busy twiddling your thumbs, and it worked out perfectly. Guess what they say is true, fortune favors the bold," Mina said, shutting off the video and putting her phone away from her. Mina looked at the other girls and remarked, "All of you were being so selfish, making poor Izuku choose between you instead of doing what was best and thinking about how to share him." Ochako approached Mina and gave her a direct glare. Mina grinned and she whispered, "I won't let you have him." As Ochako stared at her, Mina leaned back against the railing and said, "It's not your choice, Ochako. It's none of our choices, but if that's how you want to play it, feel free to fight amongst yourselves for my sloppy seconds, because I gave everything I had to Izuku, and if any of you think you can take him from me all for yourself, I won't allow it." This was unbelievable to her. She had assumed Toru was her greatest rival the entire time, oblivious to the other girls. Because of this mistake, Mina had taken Izuku away from her, and now she had to decide whether to share him with the others or lose him entirely. Since Izuku was the only man she desired and she had been too slow to grab him, Toru was devastated that she had already lost. He left because she didn't fight hard enough. Asui stood beside Mina and gazed at the 4 remaining girls, saying, "I'm fine with that." With a tight embrace, Mina said, "Oh Sue, I knew you'd see reason." Mina was a nervous wreck on the inside, but she had been cool as a cucumber on the outside. "I'm so glad someone came to my aid because if it had been me alone, I couldn't have prevented them from ruining my plan." Ochako gazed in shock at Sue's choice. Sue put a finger to her chin and Ochako said, "Sue W, what do you mean you're okay with this? I really like Midoriya, but I also like you girls. I want us to stay friends and be with Midoriya. So I agree with Mina." "Well, the way I see it, we have 2 options. Either we argue among ourselves, tearing apart the friendships we've made and causing Midoriya more pain, or we hold onto our friendship and compromise with Ishido's plan." Jiro sighed, glancing at the 2 girls before moving to Mina's other side. "When you put it like that I can't disagree. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few and all that. Besides, it's not the strangest thing I've heard of," she replied with a smirk. With Mina, Sue, and Jiro pitted against Momo, Toru, and Ochako, the group was evenly divided. Mina used her trump card after realizing that the 3 would not back down. "Alright then girls, we'll do this your way. If me, Sue or Jiro make it furthest in the sports festival we get Izuku as ours, but if any of you win then whoever makes it the farthest out of the 3 of you gets him. Can you agree to that?" Mina gestured with her hand. After exchanging glances, the 6 girls placed their hands on top of Mina's. Deal. On Saturday, Izuku approached the Ua gate. He was there for that All Might training session. Recalling the text he'd received from Mina the previous evening, he raised his gym bag. "Everything will go according to plan, but we should all maintain our composure and wait until after the sports festival before taking any action." Midoriya wholeheartedly agreed. He didn't want to disrupt anyone's training, and this new peculiarity of his would require his undivided attention. Nevertheless, he was anxious because Mina had not updated him on the outcome of the meeting. Was she attempting to spare his feelings by concealing the fact that it had gone badly? He inhaled deeply. He told himself to keep your attention on the task at hand. When Midoriya arrived on campus, All Might was waiting for him, and he swiped his student ID. He was wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans. All Might said, "Good morning, young Midoriya. Are you ready for some training?" Izuku nodded, his heart thumping with excitement. Izuku exclaimed, "Yes sir All Might." All Might cupped a hand to his ear and leaned in closer. Izuku inhaled deeply as he observed All Might's actions. "I can't hear you," I said. "Are you ready for some training?" "Yes sir All Might." All Might straightened up and gave a nod. Izuku kept up with him as he jogged off towards Ground Gamma, saying, "That's what I like to hear, now let's go." He then stopped in front of the site's large doors. As Izuku surveyed the industrial area, All Might said, "This young man is Ground Gamma, where we'll be seeing how that quirk of yours works." Wow, Ua really goes all out, doesn't it? He would have thought he was in a big city if he hadn't known any better. Izuku said, fearing that he had let All Might down. "I've been trying to reach out to that new power All Might, but I haven't had much luck. It still feels out of reach." As Izuku closed his eyes and recollected that day, All Might said, "Never fear young Midoriya, mental training can only get you so far, but now we can get into the physical stuff. I want you to remember what it was like to have that new power flowing through you. What were you feeling? What were you thinking about?" The flashes of his friends' faces being broken by that monster, the pain of his broken body as Nomu beat him, his rage at not being able to do more, and most importantly, the sense that despite All Might's quirk, he was still not good enough. To transcend who he was now, he required more power. Izuku clenched his fist as full cowl came to life around his body. However, instead of the typical green lightning crackling around his form, the energy was red, and his hair rose up, flickering like fire, and it appeared as though steam was emanating from his body. Upon witnessing Izuku's fists turn dark with a red sheen halfway up his forearm and his legs experience the same transformation all the way up to his knees, All Might's eyes widened. Izuku opened his eyes and clenched his teeth while glancing at his body. All Might said, "Now how does that feel?" As he watched it steam out of his mouth, Izuku let out a breath. Izuku slowly raised his fist in response, saying, "It's like clenching a muscle. If I lose focus it will stop." All Might raised his arms to defend himself as Izuku lifted his fist and punched, saying, "It'll get easier with time now that you've activated it yourself. Try throwing a punch at me, don't hold back." As a nearby steel pillar was punched through behind him, All Might froze in place. Izuku's fist retracted, knocking the boy off balance and causing him to spin and fall to the ground. Izuku sat up, and All Might explained, "You were supposed to hit me, Midoriya." By looking at the pillar, which had been punched through a perfect hole with no warping to the metal. All Might could see the power it possessed even though the punch didn't connect. All of the force was concentrated at the point of impact. Izuku said as he stood up, realizing that his transformation was over. I was trying all might, but my fist is just so fast and the farther out it gets the less control I have. It was easier when I had Luffy in my head, he helped me guide it, but now it's too much. At that, All Might gave a nod. Although All Might was accustomed to traveling at incredible speeds and Izuku's fist had been too quick for him to see, it's likely that Izuku had never encountered anything so swift. As Izuku focused on retrieving his full cowl, All Might put a hand to his chin. Before coming up with a solution, All Might asked himself, how can I put him on the right track without giving him the answer outright? Izuku cocked his head, considering all the things he knew rubber could do, and All Might said, instead of focusing on the stretching part of the quirk, why not focus on some of the other things rubber can do? He had read numerous books about the characteristics of rubber in the past few days. Bringing forth his new full cowl, Izuku exclaimed, let's see, rubber can stretch, but it can also bend, bounce, expand and retract. He would need to come up with a name for it later. Izuku watched as his fist sank into his wrist and then his wrist into his forearm as he clenched it and pulled it back. Izuku lost focus as he yelled, All Might looked, his fist slammed into the hero, who blocked in time to prevent him from being flung back into a wall. Izuku yelled, All Might, as he rushed to the hero, who was coughing and swishing back the dust. Izuku apologized profusely as All Might got to his feet, largely unharmed, saying, All Might, I'm so sorry, I lost focus, it just shot out. Never fear, Midoriya, it will take more than that to hurt me, but now you see that you can control this quirk. By withdrawing your fist into yourself, it's like loading a bullet into the chamber of a gun. Instead of trying to aim the bullet yourself, all you have to do is learn to keep your arm steady and let it guide your fist. All Might clarified as Izuku glanced at his arm and nodded. You can't expect to grasp a quirk in its entirety at first, it's like putting together a puzzle, dealing with one piece at a time until the picture comes together as a whole. All Might clarified. Izuku held his hand up to his face and then clenched it, one step at a time. As Izuku assumed his training stance, All Might yelled, exactly, now come on young man, we have much more to learn, so come at me. He watched Tamura through his camera while All For One sat in his chair. The boy had started to become obsessed with the boy who had defeated Nomu and was still sulking over his defeat at Ua. All For One was forced to acknowledge that he was as enamored of the boy as his pupil was. He yawned and leaned back, settling into his chair and starting to fall asleep. He rarely slept, and when he did, it was at best irregular. He was in excruciating pain. Although he was still alive, everything was painful, and the surgeries left scars on both his body and his mind. Naturally, he would never acknowledge any of this. He had been preparing this for some time, and with the surrender of Japan's navy, he decided it was time to cut off this island from the outside world, solidifying his hold on the country. All For One stood on the Japanese coast. A cannonball fired from the ocean landed in front of his rushing army of quirk users as he stood there, halting them in their tracks and causing them to explode upon impact. His army was speeding towards the shipyard. He noticed a lone ship sailing toward the coast as he turned to face the ocean. It is the flag of a straw-hatted skull. For one thing, this flag had already been seen by another individual who was entrusted with his stupid brother's peculiarity. He referred to himself as the Pirate King Luffy. Despite the fact that he was merely a self-centered individual who wanted to do as he pleased, some people hailed him as a hero, especially his 9 crew members. He had previously faced All For One with Luffy's brother. If his brother hadn't given his life to let Luffy get away, he would have killed the king and had him dead to rights. It soared through the air with the sound of another cannonball. All For One heard a shout above him as he lifted his arm to blast the ball away with his air cannon quirk. He saw a huge fist crashing down on him when he looked up. Was he mounted on the cannonball? All For One, he thought as he used his ability to fly to avoid the huge fist's impact, which broke the ground and sent a shockwave through his army. You careless idiot! All For One shouted as he rained lightning from his palm on the man, creating a cloud of dust. Out of my sight, you! Luffy pulled himself towards All For One and slammed his head into his shoulder as 2 arms suddenly emerged from the dust cloud and grabbed hold of it. For my brother, that is, shouted the Pirate King before punching All For One in the stomach, sending the older man to the ground only for him to stop inches above it before dodging to the side to avoid Luffy's foot. Rubber stamp smash! Luffy yelled as he collapsed to the ground in front of All For One, assuming a combat position. All For One is over. As he threw his fist back, Luffy swung it forward in the direction of All For One, who punched back. Kinetic Enhancer. Both men were thrown back as the two fists collided. Not finished. Gear 2. Luffy's body began to issue forth steam as his body became red only for the pirate to disappear, appearing at all for one's side. Jet pistol smash. Luffy grabbed hold of the boy's chest, and all for one's body crumpled around his fist. Immolation. As Luffy was flung backwards, he slid across the floor before rising to his feet, revealing an X-shaped burn across his chest. As Luffy scowled at him, All for One remarked, "Your brother's quirk is quite something." His hand was on fire. "I'll crush you." Before rushing in the direction of All for One, who had his arms crossed, Luffy yelled as more steam erupted. "Let me demonstrate my true abilities with your brother's peculiarity." The stone began to melt and fall like lava as All for One's body erupted in flame, his skin becoming jagged and cracked like a mountain face. "You can't touch him." When Luffy's fist struck his face, he felt the impact and smelled burning flesh, but then another fist struck his chest, followed by his stomach, shoulder, face, and ribs, cutting off All for One. Jet Gatling's smash. Ignoring his flaming fists, Luffy yelled as he hammered All for One. "It's impossible that he would go this far. I won't be defeated. I'll take my brother's quirk back, thank you." All for One thought as he slammed his hands into the ground, injecting it with flame before it burst out around Luffy, soaking him in molten stone. All for One rushed towards Luffy, only to be shot in the shoulder by one of Luffy's crew. Then, a monster with antlers appeared behind Luffy, grasped him, and slammed its hand onto All for One, driving him deep into the ground. He grabbed a glass of water and gulped it down as he shook off the dream, clutching his abdomen and feeling the pain of those blows again. All for One jolted awake, breathing heavily, as the last of his dream faded away. "Just a memory," he said. As the crowd cheered at the class entrance, Izuku and the rest of his class entered the spacious stadium on UA's campus. "You know them, the class that recently repelled a villain attack. Hero Course 1A, Present," Mike yelled as the audience erupted. As Katsuki stood beside him, Izuku remarked, "Wow, I never thought we'd get this kind of adulation, leaves me kind of embarrassed." With his red eyes locking onto Izuku's green ones, the blonde growled, "Shut your ass, Izuku. Soon enough, they'll be cheering for me when I win this thing. This time, I'm going to crush you and prove that my idea of a hero is correct. So, you nerd, you had better give it your all." Izuku eyed Katsuki as he yelled. As Kirishima moved between the two, putting an arm over each of their shoulders, Izuku remarked, "Sure thing, Katsuki, I won't lose." When Bakugo turned away from both boys, leaving Kirishima hanging only on Midoriya's shoulder, the redhead remarked, "That's some manly words, guys, but don't forget about us, you two aren't the only ones with something to prove." "Well, I suppose we'll see who's on top in the end, right?" Izuku grinned at Kirishima as he said, "Izuku is trembling." Izuku slapped the redhead in the side and said, "I'm looking forward to taking you on as well, Kirishima." Both of them grinned as Kirishima walked away, rubbing his ribs slightly. Ojiro smiled at the boy with the green hair and said, "I'm looking forward to overcoming the fruits of your new training, Izuku." Izuku turned from the boy to face the girls in the class, who were scattered throughout the crowd except for Mina, Jiro, and Sue, who were gathered together. The three girls noticed Izuku staring at them, and Jiro blushed, twirling her earlobe, while Sue looked down, blushing. Mina smiled at the two, shook her head, and then waved at Izuku. "Don't worry, Ojiro, I'm hoping to go against you as well." Izuku waved back and smiled shyly, wanting to approach them and talk, but Mina had asked him to keep his attention on the sports festival, saying that neither of their feelings would cause them to lose focus, and Izuku had to agree, so he kept to himself for the time being. Mina had promised to update him on the rendezvous's progress after the festival was over, and he turned to face the main stage as Midnight entered to a flurry of applause, wolf whistles, and catcalls. "Hello everyone, today I will be your announcer. My name is R18 Pro Hero Midnight." This little innuendo elicited more cheers. But enough about me, this is about our glorious students putting their all on the line chasing their dreams, for this UA's sports festival. I hope you're excited because I sure am. Some might even say I'm sopping wet with enthusiasm. Midnight pointed to Izuku, who started to perspire right away before feeling a shove to his shoulder and turning to face Ojiro, who was gesturing for him to continue. "To start off our wonderful sports festival, I would like to call upon Izuku Midoriya to give us our opening speech. I just want to say that we all have our own reason for being here and pursuing the path of a hero," Izuku said after taking a deep breath before taking the stage. "To realize our dream, we are all giving this sports festival our all. I am honored to be studying with such brave individuals, and I am eager to test my mettle against each and every one of you. I think this saying from my sensei applies to everyone here. Iron brother sharpens brother as iron sharpens iron. Together, let's get sharper plus ultra. Izuku's unreserved promise to give it his all calmed even the students who had previously arrived at Class 1A believing that everyone there was a bunch of conceited jerks. He said, punching his fist into the air as the arena erupted in cheers. As Izuku stepped down to give Midnight the floor again, Tetsu said, well, that was a positively orgasmic speech from Class 1A's Izuku Midoriya. I guess all of Class A isn't a bunch of jerks. The first event is going to be an obstacle course race. After leaving the stadium, the students will enter through the opposite entrance and complete a full lap around the prepared track. Yes, it is simple, but as they say, simple does not equate to easy. The course is full of obstacles that, if you are not careful, will cause you to lose the race before you know it. Set your marks and go. The students crowded into the exit tunnel in a rush to get out as soon as possible after Midnight smacked her whip against the concrete to announce the start of the race. They're testing us to see how we get through this, Izuku thought as he hurried for the door, but as he got closer, he felt a blast of cold air and instinctively leapt to the tunnel's walls before doing the same from wall to wall until he flew out over the iced crowd thanks to Todoroki. However, it appears that he wasn't the only one who escaped Todoroki's trap, as Bakugo, Yuga, and Momo appeared to do so without any issues. Icy hot, you're going to need to perform better than that, Bakugo shouted as he exploded himself towards the dual quirk user before noticing much bigger targets. These bastards again. Bakugo swore as Todoroki absorbed this latest challenge. He put a hand on the ground and ice erupted from it, jettisoning towards the large robots and encasing them in ice in seconds as Todoroki ran through their enormous legs. So these were in the regular entrance exams, were they? Hun, I wish they had thought of something more challenging after all my dad is watching. Hey, that kid did it, now is our chance to succeed. As Izuku watched the robots and the clear trap Todoroki had left them in, someone yelled. If I were you, I wouldn't. I knocked them off their feet. Just as the robots began to fall, Todoroki said, on purpose. Izuku smiled. As he leapt upwards towards the first falling robot, Izuku thought, you must be really underestimating us. He slammed his fist into it, just like he had done during the entrance exam, shattering it completely as icy robot parts fell to the ground. Remember the training? Izuku thought as he channeled new energy into his legs as he hit the ground, following Todoroki. His legs compressed into themselves before springing back, propelling Izuku forward. Todoroki looked back and saw Izuku crash into the ground, only to suddenly emerge from the dust cloud like a jack in the box, caught up to him in an instant as they approached the gorge full of stone pillars. Izuku, you jerk, are attempting to show me up, but I will not allow it, Bakugo yelled, swiftly catching up to the two leaders. As he started to ice slide across the many threads that connected the pillars to the opposite side, Todoroki said over his shoulder, sorry, I'll leave him to you. Izuku grinned as he observed the twin-haired boy extend his lead. Todoroki, you can't shake me that easily. Bakugo looked down and saw Izuku falling farther and farther before spitting and blasting across the gorge. Izuku shouted as he started running faster full tilt towards the edge of the gorge before jumping off it into the air and avoiding Bakugo's explosive energy as he fell. Is he insane? What the devil? Present Mike yelled as he saw Izuku plunge into the gorge like a swan. Oh, to hell with it, I'm still your mother, and you're going to give me a heart attack. Inko Midoriya said, shaking her head and clutching her chest at home. No, I trust you, Izuku. I know you've got a plan. She picked up her tea with trembling hands, she yelled. Izuku started to fall to the bottom of the gorge, then clenched his fist, causing the same transformation that had taken over his legs to appear on his arm. Izuku recalled his training with all might as he pulled his fist into his arm and aimed it at one of the pillars, then let it go and felt it slam into the pillar, his fingers biting deeply into the stone as his arm went taut. Izuku swung on it like a vine through the jungle, and at its apex, he released his hand, fling himself high into the air, watching Bakugo blast himself from pillar to pillar while the other contestants started to cross the gorge. I can do this, he said, and as gravity took over, he threw out his arm once more, swinging himself all the way across the gorge before hitting the opposite side of the gorge and rolling to save speed. He then got up and headed straight for the next obstacle, seeing Todoroki ahead of him and hearing Bakugo right on his tail. All right, Eraser, tell me what we just saw. Apart from her strength, is there anything else peculiar about Midoriya? Looking at Eraser, who shrugged, Present Mike asked. No, but it's possible that he found a new application for his peculiarities during his battle at the USJ. Since Midoriya's quirk is a stockpile that enables him to use the energy he has stored to enhance his body, It's possible that he learned or created this. That's what heroes ought to aim for. Every day, new villains with peculiarities pose a threat to society, and each one requires a different approach. Wow, that was some really great commentary there, buddy. I knew you had it in you. Present Mike nodded. Present Mike yelled and gave Aizawa a shoulder clap. I could ice it over, but that would make it easier for others to cross, Todoroki said, glancing at the patches of recently turned earth in the mine warning signs. I'll have to take this slowly. It's unavoidable, he said, moving cautiously and slowly across the minefield. As of right now, Todoroki from Class 1A is leading the field after arriving at the mine, but don't worry, these mines won't kill you. Still, stay away from them unless you don't mind getting severely bruised. Bakugo and Midoriya, both from Class 1A, are competing in a jockeying match for second place. Present Mike chuckled a little as Midoriya dodged an explosive palm and then retaliated with a finger flick that Bakugo managed to avoid, feeling the wind grab hold of his shirt. Izuku paused to consider the minefield in front of him, analyzing as Bakugo sped past him cautiously but quickly moving through the field. What is the reason behind Izuku's fear of a small explosion? Bakugo taunted Izuku, who gave him a brief glance before acting. Izuku then called forth his full cowl and slammed his fist into the ground, causing a cloud of dust that the other students had to run through. After the dust had cleared, people could see Izuku placing two large pieces of earth next to each other, sparingly spaced apart. Okay. This eraser is confusing to me. In order to construct a rock sculpture, Midoriya has dropped from second to nearly last place. What might he have planned? As he observed the boy supporting the bases of the two enormous pieces of rock, Eraserhead was also a little perplexed. What on earth could you be thinking, young man? Sue walked past Izuku, who was skillfully crawling between the hidden mines because she couldn't risk jumping through them and setting them off. All Might said, ruffling his hair in bewilderment. Izuku wiped his sweaty forehead as he glanced over his launchpad, then grinned and summoned his red cowl on his arms. He then grabbed hold of the two large boulders and started walking backwards, his arms beginning to stretch more and more until he picked up his feet and his arms quickly retracted, slinging him forward completely, avoiding the minefield, and landing on the other side just as Bakugo and Todoroki did, hitting the ground running as he took the lead away in one fell swoop. Sorry Izuku, I'll be going ahead, she whispered, trying to maintain her lead against the other girls. Izuku was constantly building a slingshot to launch himself across the minefield and take first place like a nighttime robbery. Can you believe that? The stadium erupted in cheers as they witnessed Izuku giving it his all in front of Bakugo and Todoroki. Go Izuku go! Go Izuku go! Inko yelled as she jumped to her feet at home and punched the air in triumph. This is your chance, young Midoriya, as the next symbol of peace. Use the sports festival to announce to all that you are here. Izuku sprinted into the stadium, winning first place to the cheers of the crowd, but all he could hear was All Might's voice. I did it, All Might. I'm here to win. Izuku grinned as he made his way deeper into the stadium and met All Might's gaze. There you have it, people, Izuku Midoriya of Class 1A won first place in the obstacle race. Bakugo gritted his teeth and looked at Izuku, who seemed to have the advantage no matter what he did. Midnight declared as Todoroki and Bakugo entered the stadium, taking second and third place, respectively. Ignore that. It will only be better when I defeat you in the end, so go ahead and take this victory, Izuku. Before turning to face Todoroki, Bakugo yelled, don't assume that just because you placed second, you're superior to me. Icy hot. As he left to make room for the other competitors, Bakugo said, kicking the ground. All right, nice show, but only the top 42 will advance from here, regrettably. The competition starts right away with the 42 qualifiers. I hope you have enough for round 2, there will be a cavalry battle next. You will all form groups of 2 to 4 individuals. Each participant will receive a point value based on where they placed in the obstacle course. The winner of first place will receive a massive 10 million points, while the last place finisher will receive 5 points and each place above that will increase by 5. Izuku felt a wave of animosity focused on him at this precise moment. He swallowed hard and made an effort to maintain his composure, even though he could feel his body perspire profusely, whether from excitement or anxiety, he couldn't tell. To steal the headbands of the opposing team and score more points in the 30 minutes given is the aim of this battle. You have 15 minutes to start assembling your teams, after which you will each receive a headband bearing your team's final score. It is against the rules to intentionally cause another team to fall, and you will be disqualified for doing so, but you can still get back up and compete even if your headband is stolen. As a timer appeared on the screen behind her, counting down from 15 minutes, Midnight clarified that the headband needed to be worn from the neck up. I expected as much. Nobody wants my massive target on their back, but there has to be someone I can team up with. Izuku searched the area for a partner but was completely rejected by the other competitors, even Ojiro, who fled from him. He looked around until he felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to face Ochako. Come together, Deku. I asked Sue and Jiro not to team up with Izuku because it would be unfair to the other girls to just ride on Izuku's coattails. From what I could see, Momo and Toru seemed to be on the same page, so I didn't think I had to ask them that, but apparently Ochako likes to play dirty. Mina's eyes darkened with anger before she turned back to Bakugo, pushing past the gathered students. From where she was standing next to Bakugo, she said, giving a thumbs up. She gripped Bakugo's shoulder tightly enough to catch the boy's attention more than anyone else's and said, "Pick me as your teammate. My acid will stop anyone from getting close." "All right, I'll need to know your names and peculiarities," Bakugo yelled, and Momo bit her fingernail after noticing Ochako's devious maneuver. "That is just poor sportsmanship, even though I understand that this is a competition." After saying that, she turned back to face Todoroki and listened to his requests. "Ochako, are you sure about that?" Izuku scratched his cheek and said, "I have a pretty big target on my back." Ochako grinned and blushed a little. She blushed and held her hands to her face, saying, "I don't mind, Izuku. I want to partner with you. After all, it's best to partner with people you like." Izuku felt as though Ochako's cuteness had punched him in the stomach, and he couldn't deny her anything. "All right, let's try to locate some additional teammates," Izuku remarked. "I already have one in mind," as he hurried to his destination, missing Ochako's broad smile. She followed him and said, "I'll walk through hellfire as long as I can be by your side, Izuku." Izuku came to a stop in front of Tenya. "Hey Iida, would you like to join Uraraka and me as partners?" Izuku remarked. "We could really go at your speed," but Iida shook his head. "Izuku, even though we are friends, I wouldn't feel comfortable playing for your team. Ultimately, I wouldn't be opposing someone I greatly admire." Iida stepped toward his selected team and positioned himself in Todoroki's camp, saying, "I must respectfully decline because I want to measure myself against you, Izuku." After a moment of shock, Izuku smiled and said, "Well, I can't say I'm not disappointed, but I respect your resolve and I will answer it in kind, Iida." Ochako stood there for a moment, glaring at Tenya, then turned away without anyone else noticing except Momo. Momo shook her head, saying, "No, I have to focus." Izuku was wondering who else he could recruit, all too aware of the limited amount of time he had left before someone grabbed his arm and yanked him face to face with a pair of crosshair eyes. I wonder what that was about. Ochako, who seemed more than disappointed, almost angry, scratched that she was downright furious. "The top ranker is you, correct? Permit me to join your team. My name is Mei Hatsume, and I am a brilliant inventor from the support course." Izuku drew back to get a good look at this girl, who was wearing Yue's gym attire with multiple machines and had pink dreadlocks and yellow cross-haired eyes. Mei put a finger to Izuku's lips, interrupting him as he said, I don't. I'll demonstrate my value to you by showing you this because it seems excessive for a stranger to approach you and ask to join your team." Mei shouted, slapping a backpack onto Midoriya only to have it then blast him a few feet in the air. "See, it's a jetpack. When paired with these hover boots, the lightweight and powerful design will provide you with remarkable maneuverability. Don't you think my babies are too amazing for words?" In addition to the fact that he had seen this design previously, Izuku had to concur that the jetpack and boots would undoubtedly give him the advantage in avoiding the other teams. "This is based on the Hero Airjet, correct?" Mei's smile widened as he asked, looking at it a little. "I see you have discerning eye, and yes, the base is based on his, but with my own modifications, of course," replied Hatsume. Relieved by this fortunate turn of events, he said, "Okay, Hatsume, welcome to the team. Now then, we just need one more person." Izuku looked left and right before figuring out who he needed, and he said, "Join me." "Students, time is up. The teams have been selected, the headbands have been distributed, so take your place and start." The field erupted in chaos as the students started to move around, all aiming for Midoriya's 10,325 points. However, they would struggle as Izuku skillfully maneuvered his team around, dodging any opposition. Dark Shadow and its master, Tokiyami Fumikage, repelled anyone who approached too closely. "Well done, Tokiyami." As Dark Shadow blocked another team, Izuku said, and Tokiyami grinned slightly. Izuku was one of the strongest students in 1A, so the raven-headed boy was taken aback when he approached him and asked for assistance. Izuku approached him and asked him to join his team, explaining that his main role would be that of the shield. It's surprising that you picked the ideal role for me without realizing my weakness, Izuku said. As you can see, the beast is tame but weak in the light, but in the dark, Dark Shadow is incredibly strong but also uncontrollable. It's amazing that you picked the ideal role for me without my knowledge. Very well, Izuku Midoriya, our agreement is set, and I promise to dedicate my darkness to your cause. As Izuku raised them into the air, Tokiyami remarked, it was nothing you didn't already expect of me after all you did ask me to be your shield. Yes, I am aware of that, but your peculiarity is still incredible. So are your machines, Hatsume? We can win this as long as we can avoid the other team's reach. Izuku couldn't see Ochako's expression of frustration. Hatsume's voice overpowered her mumbled, I'm the one doing the heavy lifting here. I made all of my babies from scratch, so of course they're fantastic. Izuku, you bastard, hand over that headband. Izuku looked up to see Katsuki rising from below, poised to knock them out of the sky and grab Izuku's headband. Katsuki yelled, slamming an explosion down on them, but Dark Shadow blocked him. He looked around the shadow creature, ducked his head to the side, feeling something whiz by his cheek and split it. He looked at Izuku, who locked eyes with him and drew back his fist as Katsuki fell back to the ground while Shiro was reeling him in. Katsuki wiped his cheek, noticing a smear of blood on his hand, and turned to face Izuku. Was that another air flick? Katsuki asked himself. Guys, get ready, we're going to go airborne again, Izuku's team said as they landed, observing the numerous teams approaching them. Izuku yelled, but Ochako yelled back after realizing she had stepped on something. I'm stuck. Deku. Izuku noticed a purple sphere adhered to the boot when he looked down. That's one of Mineta's balls, but Izuku just missed a purple sphere that landed in front of them by swerving to the side. He glanced back to see Shoji running toward him, but then he and Mineta locked eyes inside the shadowy enclosing of his arms. Even though Ochako's hover boot was stuck quickly, Mineta screamed, Sorry Izuku, I know I still kind of owe you for the USJ, but this is a competition, and though it pains me to attack a comrade like you I have no choice. Relinquish the headband. Izuku had no choice but to try to lift them into the air, destroying the boot completely while listening to Mei's groans about her broken invention and barely avoiding Sue's tongue. Sue glared at Uraraka and said, Don't forget about me, Izuku, and Ochako. The two locked eyes. Ochako remarked, The boot's broke now we can't move like we need to. Izuku nodded. Tokiyami shook his head and said, I guess we're grounded. We'll be depending on you even more now. I'm sorry. Just as Todoroki's team arrived, he said, I expected as much Midoriya I'll hold fast to our pact don't worry. As the two boys' eyes met, Todoroki said, I told you, Midoriya, that I would beat you. Izuku's thoughts were brought back to their pre-festival waiting room experience. Todoroki had approached him and said outright. Izuku looked Todoroki in the eye and smiled, saying, Midoriya, I know that my quirk is more powerful than yours, and yet all might backs you, but even with that I will defeat you. You may be right that your quirk is more powerful than Todoroki, but even so I'm going to win this thing and if that means I have to go through you then so be it. Assuming that the top two teams were preoccupied with each other, the other teams launched an offensive, especially Team Shoji, who recently learned that their headband had undoubtedly been stolen while chasing Izuku's squad. Todoroki commanded, Yayorozu now. Kaminari do it. As Yayorozu made a cloak to stop Kaminari's electricity and an iron shaft from her arm, stabbing it into the ground. As it engulfed the other teams, shocking them in place, Tokiyami unleashed Dark Shadow, blocking Kaminari's lighting, anticipating what was going to happen. Todoroki then iced them to the ground, taking the time to steal their headbands. Midoriya took advantage of the chance to pull away from Todoroki's group, who soon started to chase after them. Todoroki seized the iron shaft that Yayorozu had made by encasing the ground in ice, forming a wall of ice that would prevent any more pursuit and seal off Midoriya's escape path, trapping them both inside the ice enclosure. Izuku exclaimed, We're too slow there catching up Tokiyami, as the boy with the bird's head ordered Dark Shadow to attack, but was stopped by the concrete slab that Yayorozu had made. Mei lamented the loss of not one, but two of her precious babies, saying, That electric attack must have damaged the jetpack, my poor baby. Looks like you'll be needing some upgrades. As his team continued to retreat, Izuku said, She's too fast with her creation quirk and we can no longer outrun them we might have to go on the offensive just to keep them at bay. They stopped at the arena's edge, where they saw ice walls on both sides. He's got us in a cage, damn it. Bakugo gritted his teeth as he watched Todoroki interact with Izuku. Nato Monoma, a Class B student, stole Bakugo's headband at that precise moment. If Icy Hot thinks he's going to win this, he's got another thing calm. Class A certainly is full of themselves to think you were all so focused on getting the top spots in the preliminary. How foolish. Guess that's why none of you even perceived that we had a plan in the works to steal the spotlight from you all. We knew that not many of us would get cut from the first round, so all we had to do was wait in the middle and watch you all try your hardest for a temporary victory like horses with a carrot in their face. Monoma said as he put on Bakugo's as his team started to flee. Monoma remarked, "You're kind of famous, aren't you? You were attacked by the sludge villain. You have to tell me about it sometime. It's a shame always being victimized." Bakugo sat on top of his team, utterly consumed by rage. "Kirishima." Bakugo snarled, and Kirishima's eyes widened in response to the outpouring of rage. As Kirishima attempted to appease him, he yelled, "Fuck everything else right now, our one and only objective is making that bastard eat his fucking words." Bakugo immediately rejected that notion, saying, "Look, if we go for Midoriya now we can definitely make up the difference and then some." As Kirishima sighed, Bakugo yelled, "Fuck that, we're going to show that blonde asshole who's the boss here, no exceptions." Kirishima exclaimed, "Okay, don't make us regret this, man," as they hustled to catch up to Monoma's group. Class B member shouted to Monoma, "Great, now he's after us, Monoma, way to go." Monoma shrugged. Monoma effortlessly parried one of Bakugo's explosive blows, but the explosion user turned around and was hit in the face as Monoma slapped Kirishima's hair. It's nothing new, heroes are always chased after by stupid villains who have a score to settle. As Zero watched in shock as Monoma detonated a few tiny explosions in his hand, he asked, "What the he has the same quirk as you?" Before Bakugo detonated another explosion at him, Monoma teased, "Wow, I can see why you like this quirk so much." However, after the smoke cleared, Monoma had hardened his body to block the explosion. Bakugo scowled at Monoma as Kirishima yelled, "Now he has mine, what gives?" Bakugo clarified, "This bastard has some kind of copy quirk." Monoma grinned. As Bakugo's team started to back away, Monoma yelled, "Bondo now," as the yellow-headed student from Class B sprayed a liquid that trapped Bakugo's team in place. "No, he's getting away," exclaimed Bakugo. Mina sprayed acid from her foot to release them so they could resume the chase, saying, "I got this, I'll melt it with my acid. I've got a lot riding on this, so I won't let this guy take me out of the running." As they raced after Monoma, Mina pondered. Bakugo yelled, "Get back here, you copy bastard," while Monoma sighed. As Bakugo closed in on his face, he was stopped by a disc of solid air that repeatedly slammed his fist into it. Monoma turned around and said, "Don't you ever give up. Knowing when you're beaten is a fundamental lesson, you know." "Ha, you look pretty funny fighting with air." Tsuburaba laughed, but Bakugo's fist broke his disc and then grabbed two headbands back before Zero's tape pulled him in. Kirishima yelled, "Warn us next time, all right," but Bakugo chose to ignore her. "He still has my headband, and I'll be damned if I let him keep it. Elbows, do it." Bakugo yelled, gesturing to Monoma's squad, "Not yet, we're going to be the undisputed champion of this battle, now go." Hanta yelled, "The name's Zero," as she hurled a length of tape past Monoma's group. Monoma teasingly exclaimed, "Nice aim," without knowing what was about to happen. "Raccoon eyes acid now," Bakugo ordered, much to Mina's annoyance. Zero pulled them in towards Monoma's team as Bakugo detonated another explosion, breaking Tsuburaba's defense and stealing the remaining headbands. "My name's Mina, you jerk," she retorted, hurling acid on the ground. Bakugo yelled, gazing at the ice blockade, "Now onto Izuku, it's time to win this." Every time his team advanced, Izuku made sure they remained on Todoroki's left side by staring at him. "You're shrewd, Midoriya, for avoiding my ice and remaining to my left. You'll simply run out of time if this continues, and I can't have that." To himself, Todoroki thought. When Todoroki noticed Izuku bending over and speaking to Tokiyami, he quickly called forth his shadow beast and sent it out to attack them. Todoroki yelled, "Kaminari," as the electricity user directed his lightning, causing Dark Shadow's fist to miss and slam into the ground, causing it to crater, forcing him to back away once more. As Iida continued, Todoroki said, "If he keeps us at this distance we won't have a chance to get his points." Iida prepared to run for his life by saying, "Everyone, I'm going to do something that will make me useless afterwards, but there's no other choice with only 60 seconds left, drastic measures must be taken." Todoroki questioned, "What exactly are you going to do, Iida?" "I'm going to force the torque and RPM of my engines into overdrive. It'll boost my speed for about 10 seconds, but after that my engines will stall for some time. It's our last-ditch effort to win this." Todoroki clenched his teeth. Iida was his team's strength, enabling them to move at amazing speeds. If this didn't work, they would be sitting ducks for any other team in addition to losing Midoriya's headband. Iida activated his Recipro burst and rushed towards Midoriya's team before nearly anyone could see them, saying, "It's as you say, Iida, we have no choice, do it." As they sped past Midoriya's team, Todoroki was stunned by the speed and reached forward for Midoriya's headband, but something hit him in the face, just in front of his eyes, causing him to blink and miss his grab. Todoroki looked at Midoriya, who was grinning triumphantly, and rubbed his eyes to clear them of the debris. Then Todoroki realized what had happened as he threw some pebbles with his other hand and said, "That was close, I thought I would miss." Dark Shadow intentionally destroyed the ground to provide Midoriya with ammunition to hold them at bay when they were attacked and failed. Anyone would recoil at the sight of a pebble in the eye. Only because of his high-speed training with All Might was Midoriya able to track Iida's lightning-fast movements and hit Todoroki with his pebble, letting out a pent-up breath. "You bastard, with the power you displayed at the USJ, I forgot about your ninja training. It's a common tactic for ninjas to blind their enemies, right? Also the use of makeshift weapons is right in your wheelhouse." Todoroki glared at Midoriya. Midoriya said, "It's as you say, Todoroki, in an enclosed space like this where escape is impossible, I had to focus on misdirecting you and it worked." Bakugo swerved between Izuku and Todoroki, noticing that Izuku still had his 10 million points, as an explosion sounded from the ice wall. As the last bell rang, Bakugo yelled, "Izuku you," and reached out to the green-haired boy, falling flat on his face as the cavalry battle came to an end. And that's it, folks, the end of the cavalry battle, and as you can see, there's barely been any movement among the top-ranked students. In first place, managing to hold onto his massive lead, is Team Midoriya with their 10,325. In second place we have Team Bakugo with 1,350. In third place is Team Todoroki with 1,175. Now here's where things get interesting. In fourth place is Team Kendo with 520. Let's give it up for all our hardworking students as we break for an hour lunch. "Come on, Eraserhead, let's eat," announced the present Mike. Midoriya grinned as he shook hands with Tokiyami and climbed off his team. Before leaving, Tokiyami remarked, "I knew I was right to pledge my dark powers to your cause, Midoriya." Izuku remarked, "Thanks for all the help, Tokiyami, I appreciate it." Ochako then leapt onto his side and gave him a tight hug. Ochako won by punching the air. "We did it, Deku, we stayed on top despite the odds." "Oh yeah," he exclaimed. "Since I'm the only girl Deku needs, I won't lose to any of you." Ochako pondered as she observed her competitors, who all had the same aggressive expression. The girl blushed as he smiled at her and said, "Yeah, I guess we did, Uraraka. Thanks for teaming up with me in the first place. You would have probably had an easier time with another team, but you chose me anyway, that means a lot." "Oh, I melt when he gives me that look." Ochako rubbed her thighs together as she thought. Ochako looked up and saw that Mei had captured Izuku's attention. "It's no problem, Deku, like I said, it's best to team up with people you like, and well, I like you a lot." Mei waved goodbye to Izuku, who scratched his cheek, and said, "Thank you very much for allowing me to use your fame to my advantage, and remember, if you ever find yourself in need of support items, think of Mei Hatsume, genius of the support course." He stretched a little, feeling himself relax now that it was over, and then felt a hand on his shoulder. "Well, being honest is the mark of a good hero, but did she have to be so blunt about it?" he asked. He turned to face Todoroki and gazed into his mismatched eyes. He simply said, "We need to talk," and turned to leave, leaving Izuku to ponder for a moment before following him. Todoroki and Izuku stood across the hall, staring at one another for a while. Seeing that the boy had something to say, Izuku inquired, "What's this about Todoroki?" Todoroki asked flatly, "Are you All Might's bastard child or something?" Izuku was obviously taken aback by this. Todoroki looked at Izuku as if he didn't believe him, but he still dropped the subject. What, of course I'm not, though even if I were, I guess I'd still say the same thing. I assure you that the only connection I have with All Might is that of teacher and student." Todoroki abruptly changed the subject and asked, "Do you know the flame hero Endeavor?" "Yeah, he's the number 2 hero right after All Might, though his popularity is pretty low." "Why do you ask?" replied Izuku. Izuku's eyes widened at this admission as Todoroki went on. "He's my father, you see, and all that man cares about is beating All Might, and for that reason, and that reason only, is why he married my mother. It was a quirk marriage. He married my mother for her ice quirk in order to create a child with a more powerful quirk. You see this burn on my face? I got it from my mother. Under my father's abuse, she simply broke one day and poured scalding hot water on my face, and then my father sent her away as if she never existed. She'd served her purpose after all, so why keep her around? That callous nature of his is why I refuse to use my left side. I don't want to have anything to do with him or his power. I'll win on my own with nothing but my right side. It was a quirk marriage, he heard Midoriya say. I'll beat you and show my old man that I don't need his power. Todoroki left the hallway. As Todoroki left, Izuku uttered the words, be that as it may, Todoroki, I fully intend to win. With a sigh, he collapsed against the wall's rear. He remarked as he went outside and headed toward the cafeteria, oh man, that was intense. Alright everyone, the third and final event of the sports festival. One-on-one matches between the finalists. Use your quirks to knock your opponent unconscious, or out of the ring, or make them cry for their mamas to achieve victory. Simple, right, and of course colorful commentary will be provided by me and Eraserhead here. Now we hand things over to Midnight. Midnight raised her hip and waved her whip at the group of pupils. Alright students, the bouts will be determined randomly, but if any of you feel as if you aren't up to this, simply raise your hand and bow out. No judgments will be made. It's a mark of a good hero to know when they've reached their limit. A hand was raised. Ojiro Mashirao said, I would like Toa withdraw please. Izuku turned to face his sparring partner and friend. Ojiro shook his head and Izuku said, Ojiro, what do you mean, were you injured or something? It's just I don't feel I deserve to be in the finals. I don't remember anything from the second match, but the very end. My honor will not permit to take advantage of such a shameful victory. Ojiro said as he looked at Izuku. Knowing that Ojiro had a very good reason for doing this, Izuku sighed and said, forgive me, Izuku. I really was looking forward to facing you in the finals. As another student raised his hand, he replied, there's nothing to forgive Ojiro, do what you feel is right, that's all any of us can do. Midnight nodded as Nirengeki Shota said, I must withdraw for the same reasons, it would not be right to profit from something I truly did not compete in. All right, then Nirengeki Shota and Mashirao Ojiro have retreated. Are there any more? After waiting a moment and determining that no one else was asking, Midnight asked. Midnight pointed to the screen, which showed a tournament bracket with the opening slots alternating between the remaining competitors before stopping to reveal that Izuku Midoriya and Hitoshi Shinso would be the first match. Izuku swallowed, took a deep breath, and then heard someone call out to him. If that is all, look to the screen behind me for you matchups, Midnight said. Are you Izuku Midoriya, correct? Izuku was about to answer when he felt Ojiro's tail cover his mouth. Asked a purple-haired boy with bags under his eyes and a smile. As Izuku and Ojiro went to Izuku's waiting room to talk, Ojiro glared at the purple-haired youth whose smile never wavered and said, not a word, Midoriya, come with me. What was Ojiro about? Izuku inquired, feeling as though he was lacking something important. Before Izuku put a hand on Ojiro's shoulder, he begged, I have some things to tell you, Izuku, and though I have no concrete evidence, I implore you to believe me. Izuku sat at the table and said, calm down, Ojiro. I trust you, say what you have to say. Ojiro took the seat across from him. As previously stated, I only remember the very end of the cavalry battle. The start of the cavalry battle is the only other image that comes to mind. I recall the guy who just spoke to you after I turned down your invitation to join your team. Perhaps the solution is to avoid talking to him because after he asked me something, there was nothing but darkness. I've only heard from others that we won because I was on his team somehow. He used me to win without my knowledge, and I'm not sure what he did. Maybe he erased your memory of it, or perhaps he took control of you somehow, but what's the trigger for his quirk? Izuku said, placing his hand on his chin as he considered the situation. Izuku muttered quickly as Ojiro watched his friend nerd out for a while with a feeble smile. All I know is that I ran into another team and was instantly myself again, but it was too late by then. That's not very helpful, I know. Izuku nodded before observing Ojiro get to his feet. If an outside force is required to break whatever his quirk is, that's not something you'll have in a one-on-one fight. Izuku took hold of Ojiro's hand as he said, good luck man, and I know this is a bit selfish on my part, but beat that guy for me too, alright. Ojiro had said, well, I've eaten up most of your time so I better get going. Count on it, Ojiro. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, these are our two competitors for the opening match of the finals. Izuku Midoriya, the clear winner of the cavalry battle in the obstacle course race, is pictured on the left from the 1A hero course. As numerous heroes discussed Midoriya, the audience erupted in applause at this declaration. Did you see him in that obstacle course? The kid's a genius and the way he uses that quirk of his is amazing. A hero replied. Yes, and he was very tactful in how he led his group during the cavalry battle. He will succeed in the future with that kind of forward thinking, a heroine said. Izuku's face was displayed on a green flag that Inko was waving back and forth at home. Yeah, Izuku. Show them what you can do. Izuku. Go. She swung the green flag as forcefully as she could, shouting repeatedly. Mikey brushed his fingers against his chest and remarked, Wow, Master Splinter Izuku is really strutting his stuff. I taught him that. Leo sat on the floor and said, Oh please, it's obvious my tactical training was the reason he took first place in the Cavalry battle. Yes, indeed, but this is where my lessons are useful. Izuku, knock me flat. Raphael punched in the direction of the screen. If only they allowed him to use his hero costume, my new design would have done him a hell of a lot better than that girl's inventions. Donnie let out a sigh. Leaning close and tucking his hands in his robe, Splinter said, Quiet boys, it's about to start. Izuku, show them the results of your labor. Look at those eye bags, man. Hitoshi Shinso from General Studies is on the right. Aizawa glared at him for a moment before turning back to the dossiers of the two students. He could give you a run for your money, Eraserhead, Mike said. This will be over soon, Aizawa thought as the two boys gazed at each other across the platform. It looks like Izuku is physically superior to Shinso, but after seeing Shinso's quirk, he at least has a fighting chance. All right, you two start the fight. Declaring the start of the fight, Midnight yelled. That monkey is unbelievable, man. For the sake of honor, he threw away the golden ticket to victory that I gave him. Horrible. Izuku scowled at Shinso as he hurried forward. What did you saw? Ojiro leapt from his seat, and Shinso grinned as Izuku's eyes glazed over and he stopped only a few steps later. You fell for it. Damn you. Ojiro moaned and slapped his hand across his forehead, feeling remorse not only that Izuku had fallen into Shinso's trap but also that Izuku had become enraged on his behalf. Well, doesn't that seem to be it? Shinso pointed to the other end of the arena and said, Now walk out of the arena like a good little hero and lose for me. Izuku turned around and started to move toward the arena's edge. I know it's rather underhanded, but we all do what we must to achieve our dreams, Shinso said. What is this? Izuku is following Shinso. Why? Before Aizawa explained, Present Mike inquired. Brainwash is Shinso's peculiarity. When he commands someone to do something, he takes control of their thoughts and turns them into his slaves. It only occurs when he wants it to on certain questions. In order to exert control over him and force him to forfeit the match, he clearly coerced Midoriya into speaking with him. Izuku. Uraraka yelled. No, he can't lose. Come on, Izuku. You can beat this guy. I know you won't let him win because, as she got to her feet, clutching the back of the chair in front of her and gazing down at the arena. Come on, Midori. You can't give up now, you've got this, and you're aiming for the top right. I'm confident you'll succeed because. Mina yelled, clenching her fists in front of her. Midoriya, you saved Mineta and me from danger at USJ. You even vanquished that monster. I know you're stronger than anyone could have ever imagined. Please show me that strength. Sue clutched her hands together in front of her and pleaded, because. No one could see Toru wringing her hands, but she thought to herself, I believe in you and know you'll find a way out of this, so please win because. Toru never took her eyes off the green-haired boy. Midoriya, you are the most courageous person I have ever seen, and I know you will win this battle, ultimately. You went out of your way to help a jerk like Bakugo change. If you're willing to go through that, then there's nothing you can't do, and that's why. Each girl thought the same words at the same moment, you're the man I love. Standing in Izuku's entrance hall, All Might waved him back toward the arena while shaking his head. No kid, stop. You can't let it end like this. You're the next symbol of peace, right? Izuku noticed that he was approaching the arena's edge more and more. As he tried to regain control over his body, he thought, I can't stop myself, my body won't listen to me. However, as he did so, the arena's colors started to fade and turn monotone, and a silhouette emerged in the hallway from which he had entered the arena. Izuku was unable to identify the person or determine if they were male or female, but that question was quickly addressed when a male voice addressed him. You idiot, your friend told you what to do and you still screwed it up. Izuku objected to being called a fool, but it wasn't unjustified because he failed despite Ojiro's efforts to assist him. Izuku reprimanded himself before he heard laughter. I did screw up, didn't I? Let my emotions get out of hand and lost control. An orange ball of energy came to life in the figure's hand as it said, yeah, I'd like to chew you out, but honestly, I would have done the same thing if some guy was talking trash about my friend, so that's why I'm going to help you out. Before smashing the ball in his hand, the man stated, this is just a sample until you are ready for my full power. A full cowl enveloped Izuku's body. Izuku exclaimed. Wait, who are you? Before the figure shook his head. As the man faded away, Izuku felt power build up in his left hand before it was released in a blast of wind. Let's hold off on that until we get a proper meeting. I don't think it'll be that long before we meet again. Izuku was standing just inside the boundary line, clutching his left hand, when Shinso dropped his arms he had raised to protect himself from the barrage of strong air. Could he have done that with just his left hand? Izuku turned around and looked directly into Shinso's eyes as he asked. How did he break my control? Shinso yelled. How did you do that? As Izuku straightened up and turned to face his left hand. His palm was slashed in a spiral pattern, as though he had pressed his hand up against a spinning blade. The pain was tolerable and they weren't too deep, but that wasn't crucial at the moment. As he started toward Shinso, he made up his mind. Present Mike declared, look at that, people, the tables have turned again. Midoriya, who was only at Shinso's mercy, is now advancing on his opponent with a powerful gust. All traces of former obedience gone. While Aizawa eyed Izuku's hand. Izuku ignored his further provocation and headed to Shinso, but Aizawa thought, I'm not sure what he did, but it's pretty clear he injured himself to break free. A rational decision in my opinion. You're so lucky to have a powerful quirk like that. I mean, you nearly caused a windstorm with just your hand. It'll be so easy for you to achieve everything you want. How blessed you must be. Shinso said while Midoriya remained mum. He won't respond to me right now. He must have heard it from that monkey. As he glared at Izuku, who approached him, Shinso pondered. Shinso yelled, I have dreams of my own, as he delivered a blow that Izuku easily sidestepped and returned with a forceful blow to Shinso's face. Shinso was flung back, tumbling end over end until his legs landed outside the arena boundary, and there was a crunch as his nose broke. Midnight raised her whip above her head in support of Izuku and declared, Shinso has been ejected from the arena. The winner is Midoriya from Hero Course 1A. Raph threw a few punches at the TV and exclaimed, that's what I'm talking about. A rock-solid punch straight to the face. Way to go, Izuku. He sighed in relief as Master Splinter relaxed the tension in his hands. While his sons celebrated their junior's victory, Splinter remarked, good job, Izuku. Inko was giving her baby boy her wholehearted support at the Midoriya home. The fact that the little child she had given birth to had grown into this incredible young man nearly astounded her. She was so proud of it. She sat back down and said, I hope Hisashi is watching. As they stood opposite one another, Izuku glanced at Shinso. As he was leaving, Shinso turned to face Izuku and followed suit. You're right, you know. I am blessed. I've only gotten this far because people believed in me and gave me the courage to work hard. I know that natural ability counts for a lot, but I learned that hard work counts for more, and I think the people here have learned that too. Shinso's classmates interrupted him, saying, I don't need your lip service. All everyone saw was a general studies student get his butt kicked. His classmate pointed out some of the pros discussing Shinso and said, hey Shinso, that was a pretty close call, you nearly had him, and I think the heroes saw that too. What an impressive quirk. With something like that capturing villains would be easy. Another person shook his head and said, yeah, I can't believe he's only in general studies. Ua must be slipping. It can't be helped with so many students applying, it's only natural that a few good ones slip through the cracks. Recalling what Midoriya had said, Shinso turned to face his retreating figure. As he entered the tunnel, Shinso grinned and rubbed the back of his head. I think the people here have learned that too, he said. Hard work counts for more. Izuku sat while the recovery girl bandaged his hand in the nurse's office. All Might questioned, that was amazing, kid, but how did you beat Shinso's brainwashing? As Izuku recalled the final memory he had before losing control of his body. All Might sat down and Izuku responded, I think another former user of One for All helped me out. Izuku shook his head and All Might said, so it wasn't Luffy this time? Izuku looked at his bandaged hand and remarked, I'm sure it wasn't, I couldn't see the person fully, but his voice sounded different and the power he used was completely different from Luffy's. Concerned about his Proto copyright ga copyright, All Might inquired, are you able to access this new aspect's power? Izuku has hardly been able to control Luffy's power, and All Might wasn't sure he was capable of handling so many different powers or assisting Izuku in training with it if he had another one to deal with. I must consider the best way to deal with this flood of new skills. As he stood up, he saw Izuku shaking his head, and he thought to himself. Izuku bowed to All Might and Recovery Girl before departing, saying, no, I can't, I don't even feel that power anymore. The man did say I wasn't ready for his power yet, so maybe it'll come to me in the future. I should leave, Shinso may come by, and I'd rather not keep him waiting. Recovery Girl looked at All Might and said, You're worried, aren't you? All Might nodded. I took this job with almost no teaching experience and I've been making it so far, but this is almost beyond my scope. Izuku is an excellent student and takes in everything I give, but let's face it, with these new quirks coming at such a breakneck pace, I don't think I can keep up. He needs more than I can give. Chio sighed and bit her tongue. As All Might got up and took out his phone, Chio said, "You're not alone, All Might. You have an entire network of friends and colleagues who would be willing to help you teach Izuku. Maybe you should reach out to some of them." With newfound energy, All Might said, "You might be onto something there, recovery girl." He then started looking through his contacts. Shoto encountered his father as he left his waiting area to go to his first finals match. "Shoto, you're putting on a pitiful display. You've fallen from second to third place and it's all because you refuse to use your flames. You could have easily won both the first and second events, but instead you're trailing behind All Might's Proto Copyright Ga copyright like a dog." As he passed his father, Shoto gritted his teeth. As Shoto turned to leave, Endeavor spoke again. "It doesn't matter where I'm at in the rankings now because I'll win this entire thing while only using my mother's quirk. I don't need your flames." Shoto continued to walk, but his expression was glaring as he entered the stage. "I have no doubt you can win this with just your mother's quirk. You are my greatest masterpiece after Allah, but even if you do, there'll come a point where your mother's quirk won't be enough and you'll have to use mine." Over the cheers of the audience, Present Mike exclaimed, "And here we have from Hero Course 1A the Master of Ice and Fire Shoto Todoroki. And his opponent also from Hero Course 1A with the weird elbows Honta Zero." With a smile on his face, Zero extended his arms. Zero complained about Present Mike's welcome speech for him, saying, "That was uncalled for, don't you think?" He glanced at Todoroki, who seemed oblivious to the impending start of the match as he stood motionless. As the start signal sounded, Zero said, "I don't feel like I can win this, to be honest." Before beginning to swing Todoroki in the direction of the boundary line, he yelled, "But I really don't want to lose either," and shot out twin lines of tape, completely enclosing him. At this moment, Todoroki raised his vile eyes above everything else. Before a loud crash echoed from the stadium, he only said, "Apologies." The audience inside the stadium had to lean back as far as they could to avoid the slope of ice in front of them, while those outside were in awe of the enormous glacier of ice that had suddenly appeared and was arcing over the stadium wall. Zero shivered where he was, trapped in ice. Through chattering teeth, Zero questioned Todoroki, Don't you think that was a bit overboard?" With her whole right half frozen over, Midnight shivered and asked, "Tell the truth, Zero, can you move?" Zero said, "Are you joking? Obviously and not." As Todoroki broke the frozen tape covering Zero's body and approached him, starting to melt him free of the ice, Midnight declared, "Zero is completely immobilized, so the win goes to Todoroki." The crowd started chanting as they watched the vanquished boy. "Nice try," to cheer Zero up. Looking down at the ground, Shoto said, "I apologize for this, it was excessive. I was upset about something else and behaved like a child." The next match, Kaminari vs Ibara, ended abruptly as well, with Denki short-circuiting himself in a full-on electrical attack that Ibara blocked with her vines before capturing Denki and winning. The finals were postponed to clear out the glacier Shoto had created. Even though it was decided in a ridiculous way, the next match was also decided rather quickly. Tenya was forced to work as Mei's unwilling assistant after she used him to showcase the majority of her inventions, attracting the attention of support companies. He then purposefully walked out of bounds, giving Iida the victory, though he appeared to be very unhappy about it. Izuku rose from his chair at this point and made his way to the waiting area, the one that Ishido was in. The door opened just as Izuku was about to knock, and Ishido almost ran into him before he could see who it was. Izuku blushed and shook his hands when Ishido said, "Oh Midori, hi. I don't think this is the time for a quickie, but I can't refuse you if you really want to." As Mina started to pout, confusing Izuku a little, he blushed and said, "No Ishido, it's nothing like that. I know you said I should keep my distance from you girls until after the festival was over, but I just wanted to come and wish you good luck." Seeing Mina's attitude grow more sour, he asked, What's wrong Ishido?" Mina asked, glancing at Izuku, "Ishido?" Who had a bewildered look on their face. "Ishido?" She asked again, and then Izuku had an epiphany. When he said, Mina, as softly as he could, Mina leaned forward. Ishido repeated, "You were coming to say good lucka," before Midoriya straightened up and inhaled deeply. He exclaimed, "Good luck, Mina," as Mina grinned and stroked his head. She pushed the waistband of her sweatpants down, exposing a familiar pair of underwear to Izuku, who blushed even more. "There's a good Midori and thanks for that, but I've already got a pretty nice good luck charm right here. Well, I'll let you get going now, he exclaimed, hurrying back to his chair as Mina burst out laughing as she emerged from her room and saw someone standing around the corner. Although the open door prevented her from seeing anything, Ochako had followed Midoriya to see where he was going. She heard most of it and gritted her teeth in a way that conveyed anger. Before going out to battle Aoyama and fulfill her promise, she yelled, I know you're there, Ochako, and I just want to let you know I am going to win this thing, on my own merits. To the dismay of Ochako, Momo, and particularly Toru, who had not advanced to the finals and was struggling to maintain her composure, she swiftly defeated the laser user and advanced to the finals. As Momo stood up to go to the waiting area, she bit her fingernail and glanced at Midoriya, who was grinning, undoubtedly ecstatic about Mina's triumph. I will also prevail, Midoriya. I want to be more than just your subordinate. I want to be your friend. She considered following him to the waiting area. Yaoyorozu faced Tokiyami as he entered the arena. I know Tokiyami has an advantage when it comes to attacking because I defended against his attacks during the cavalry battle, but if I can get close and defend against him, the battle will be mine. She was so preoccupied with her planning that she didn't even notice the start signal until Dark Shadow was almost upon her. Dark Shadow slammed a tiny shield that Yaoyorozu had made, knocking her off balance. She then turned around for another attack, repeating the move repeatedly before abruptly ceasing. This is my opportunity, Midnight's announcement interrupted Momo's thought as she was forming a long pole. As Momo watched Tokiyami bow and leave, she dropped the shield and pole and exclaimed, Momo Yaoyorozu has been pushed out of bounds. The winner is Fumikage Tokiyami. She glanced at Midoriya, who was also wearing a sympathetic expression for her loss. As she left the field, she smiled sadly. That was really one-sided, but I'm not surprised. Tokiyami played to his strengths, and after facing her in the cavalry battle he knew how best to handle her quirk, Izuku said with a grin on his face. Ochako thought, that's one less opponent with Toru, Su, and Jiro already knocked out. It's just down to me and Mina as it should be. She's the cause of all this. She was staring at Mina. Now they both understood the stakes. With both having essentially the same quirk, the next battle between Kirishima and Tetsu was one of the longest of all the earlier matches and would go on for a long time. When Izuku noticed this, he went back to the waiting area to talk to Uraraka. Although he was aware that he was once again breaking his promise to Mina, he was certain that Mina was aware that he wouldn't be able to fulfill his word for very long. Iida was already there when he opened the door after knocking. With his customary robotic gestures, Iida praised, Oh hey Midoriya, come to wish Uraraka good luck as well, have you? I'm pleased to see our class representative taking such a hands-on approach when it comes to our classmates. Good show, sir. As Izuku coughed, Ochako looked at him and said, Deku, what are you doing here? Well, I know you're going up against Katsuki in the next match and I want you to know he's not going to go easy on you no matter what. I don't think he's capable of holding back, to be honest, but that's why I wanted to give you this, he said while displaying his hero analysis notebook. Before Ochako pushed the notebook back towards him, he stated, I've known Katsuki since we were kids, and have had a front row seat to how he uses his quirk. I think I have a plan that can help you win. She recalled what Mina had said to her most recently, scolding her for her actions during the horse fight. She hugged Izuku and whispered in his ear, saying, I can't accept this, Izuku. I'm happy that you want to help me, but I can't ride behind you forever. I want to do this on my own and prove to myself that I can stand with the best on my own power. Izuku nodded, and she remarked, I know you believe in me, but I want to do this on my own, so give me something special when I win. Izuku pulled away from her and said, You can count on it and good luck, Uraraka, I'll be watching. Iida also nodded. Before Ochako headed to the arena after a double knockout with Kirishima and Tetsu, Iida said, We both will, Uraraka. Bakugo, glaring as usual, stood across from her. Present Mike said, The next match is Hero Course 1A Katsuki Bakugo, the runner-up in the cavalry battle, to applause from the audience. Present Mike yelled, Then we have also from Class 1A and my personal favorite to win, Ochako Uraraka, as Aizawa gave him a sidelong glance. Aizawa expressed disappointment in his colleague's blatant bias, saying, I thought you were supposed to be impartial. Bakugo said, This is your one and only chance, pink cheeks, bow out or get hurt, simple as that. He was met with a glare that was just as intense as his own. Bakugo gritted his teeth and looked up at the stands, where he saw Izuku. I'm not quitting. I have too much riding on this to lose to you, he said. As Bakugo yelled, You sound just like him. Fine, I'll put you in your place and then do the same to him. Uraraka ran for him, her hands outstretched to grasp hold, but she was thrown back to her starting position by an explosion. As Uraraka tried the same move, Izuku clenched his fist and looked at her. Given that the majority of Izuku's previous predictions had come true, Ojiro questioned, "So what are her chances, Izuku?" Izuku said, "It's going to be hard. Normally Uraraka's quirk would be the end all. After all, almost nobody can move around in 0G, but Bakugo can." Ojiro raised an eyebrow before recalling how powerful Bakugo's explosions are at moving him through the air. Wincing as Bakugo's explosion threw Ochako back again, Ojiro said, "You're right, even if he's sent floating he can still maneuver with his explosions. So it's pretty much hopeless then?" Izuku clasped his hands in front of his face and said, "Not entirely the way I see it, but if Uraraka is quick, she might be able to make Bakugo float long enough to get him outside the arena, but that would require an amazing amount of circumstance." Uraraka looked at the smoke-filled arena and stood up again, wiping the dirt from her cheek. "I must win for myself as well as for Izuku and my family. I'd like to win. I want to provide for my family and have Izuku for myself." As Uraraka removed her jacket, she sent it floating in Bakugo's direction before circling around him and approaching his back. However, Bakugo's inhuman reflexes prevented it from working, and he turned, releasing a huge explosion that almost sent Ochako out of the arena. The explosion user was unfazed by the jeers from the crowd and continued to watch Ochako. "She never stops getting up. How come she won't stay down?" As Ochako stood up and pressed her fingers together, he pondered. Uraraka looked up at the enormous pile of rubble and said, "Thanks Bakugo, without you I wouldn't have been able to use this move." So that was her plan. Izuku nodded appreciatively at Ochako's resourcefulness. "Meteor shower!" Ochako exclaimed with a smile as the stage's debris started to fall in Bakugo's direction. "He will be unable to avoid them all no matter what he does, and I will have an opportunity to help him float. I've succeeded." As Bakugo lifted his hand above his head and detonated a huge explosion, she thought to herself, destroying her trump card and holding her at bay with the force and wind of his explosion. Katsuki felt his arm snap with pain and dropped it. He looked at Ochako, who was in awe of this impressive performance, and said, "That was close, but I figured you'd have some kind of shitty plan since you're always hanging around Izuku." Ochako fell to the ground as he raised his smoking hand and said, "I think it's time we got serious, wouldn't you say, Uraraka?" "Now I can't stop." As she started to crawl in Bakugo's direction, Ochako pondered. "Like Deku, I must not give up." Her eyes were beginning to swim over the battlefield view. "I'm not going to give up." Ochako collapsed on the arena floor, unconscious. After being pronounced the winner, Bakugo exhaled a breath he was unaware he had been holding and left the stadium. Ochako opened her eyes gradually and noticed that she was in the hospital. Instead of seeing the recovery girl, she made eye contact with the 5 other girls in her class. She slowly sat up and observed each of them. There was no need for a preamble because everyone understood the purpose of this meeting. Mina nodded, and Ochako said in a distant, hollow voice, "I lost." Ochako's mind was racing with thoughts of how she had failed her parents and herself, but most importantly, how she would never again feel Izuku in her arms. She wasn't strong enough, so it was all over now. Toru gave a choking gasp and covered her face with her hands, but neither was visible. "This bet was you guys' idea, and as per the terms you 3 have no right to interfere with me, Sue, and Jiro, since I've advanced the furthest in the tournament." Momo clenched her fist and bit her lip. "I never had the opportunity to express my feelings to him, and I will never do so again." Momo fought back tears as she thought. Mina said, "I want you all to join us." Her request startled the room's sadness. Ochako kept her head down, but Momo and Toru looked up. Ochako's voice remained flat and hollow as she asked, "What do you mean?" After taking a breath, Mina chopped Ochako's head, causing the girl to yell and clutch her head. "Just what I said, I want you girls to be happy too. I never intended to steal Izuku from any of you. Why do you think I did all of this? I knew if something wasn't done we'd all be attacking each other and ruin our friendship and hurt Midori. I love all of you as my friends and I love Midori as my boyfriend. I don't want to have to give up either of them. I'm selfish that way, and believe it or not, Midori is just as selfish. I know he has feelings for Toru and Ochako still, and I'm fine with that, and if he finds he has feelings for you guys as well, then I'm good with that too. The only question is, are you guys okay with that?" Mina asked Ochako, Momo, and Toru as she raised her hand. As she considered what she was going to say, Momo blushed and said, "Some is better than nothing, the logic is sound." Momo grabbed Mina's hand, but both of them felt an unseen grip on their hands. "After all, bet or not, it's not like we can just forsake these feelings of ours, and much like Mina, I've come to appreciate all of you as my friends and don't want to lose that. I will join you, Mina." As the 5 girls gazed at Ochako, who was crying, Toru said, I still love Izuku, and if this is the best way to be with him then I'll do it. I don't want to stop loving him or stab you girls in the back. It was really hard. I saw Mina and Izuku together and it hurt so badly. I thought if maybe I could be cutthroat like the women in those dramas I would win, but it hurt to do those things to you guys. I just didn't want to lose him. Ochako wept as she felt multiple hands on her torso. As the girls embraced, Mina said, It's okay, Ochako. I kind of overdid it with that video. I'm sorry everyone. Izuku walked to his waiting room and inhaled deeply. When he arrived at the infirmary, Mina and the other girls were entering, despite his intense desire to see Ochako. He had decided to give them his chance. He needed to give Todoroki his whole attention for his upcoming match, but he ran into Bakugo as he turned the corner. Bakugo stood in front of Izuku and glared at him, asking, It was your plan, right? Izuku questioned, What are you talking about? Before Katsuki seized his collar. Before Izuku slapped his hand away, Bakugo yelled, You gave her that shitty plan so she could win and you wouldn't have to face me in the end, you coward. As Bakugo clenched his numbed arm, Izuku said, I didn't give her that plan. I offered a plan, but Ochako said no, she wanted to beat you on her own and we both know close she came. Can you even feel your arm after that explosion? Izuku walked past Bakugo, who growled, and said, If anything, I'm glad you won. It'll be easier fighting you than Ochako. As he entered his waiting room, he yelled, I'm easier to fight? You're telling me I'm weaker than her? While glancing at Izuku. Bakugo yelled, We'll see about that, you fucking piece of shit, and hurried away. Izuku leaned against the door and inhaled deeply. He hadn't explained to Bakugo why fighting him would be simpler. To be completely honest, he wasn't sure if he would have had the strength to battle Ochako. Izuku decided he needed to refocus and started going through his kata. He couldn't take the chance of losing his temper like he had with Shinso. Todoroki was strong. One mistake would be his undoing. He told himself, it's time to go all out. After seeing Izuku at the sports festival in USJ, Todoroki sat in his room contemplating everything he had learned about him. Todoroki vowed to himself as he got ready to leave for the arena, I won't let him catch me off guard again. Izuku encountered Endeavor Shoto's father while he was making his way to the arena. He tried to pass him after deciding it would be best to avoid conflict, but the hero interrupted him. Izuku turned to face the flame hero, who said, That was quite an impressive power you displayed at the first match of the finals. I've only felt wind like that from All Might's punches. I hope he doesn't also claim that I'm All Might's son. Izuku pondered in his mind. I created Shoto to overcome All Might, and since you have a similar power you will be a good testing ground for him. As such, I would appreciate it if you not disgrace either of you and give my son everything you have. That's all I wanted to say. I apologize for holding you up. Endeavor left the room before Izuku spoke. I'm not All Might. Endeavor gave the boy a questioning glance. The number 2 hero asked, and what's that supposed to mean? Izuku turned on his heel and walked into the combat arena, saying, I'm not All Might and Todoroki isn't you. We're each our own person even if you were Todoroki's father. Mikey laughed a little before Raph gave him a back of the head slap. Oh man, this is an uphill battle for real. That Todoroki kid is one cold customer. As they watched Izuku and Shoto enter the stadium, Raph exclaimed, Oh please, he's no match for Izuku. Kid's all show and no substance. Depends too much on that quirk of his. I bet one solid punch and he falls to his knees crying. And here they are folks, the boy who started our finals off with a bang, Izuku Midoriya, and our glacier maker Todoroki. These two have each displayed incredible power from the start, so how will this battle turn out now? Screamed the audience. Todoroki and Izuku exchanged glances before speaking simultaneously. I'm going to win this. Izuku's full cowled form raced towards Todoroki, throwing a punch that Todoroki narrowly avoided, creating a shard of ice from the ground that nicked Izuku's side as he spun to avoid the brunt of the attack. Midnight yelled, Let the matcha begin, as Todoroki opened with an ice blast, only to have it blasted apart by the wind from Izuku's blow. He then threw out a roundhouse kick, shattering the mini glacier, showering Todoroki with chunks of ice. Izuku attacked with ice once more as Todoroki slid back, gaining distance, but Izuku punched it to pieces once more before chasing after Todoroki. Wow, these kids are on it today. Izuku is hounding Todoroki around the battlefield, not giving him any breathing room, but Todoroki's keeping a solid defense via his constant ice assaults, Mike commented. To get a grouse from the tape user, Tokiyami commented, It's a good strategy. Staying close to Todoroki means he can't release any of those massive attacks like he did with Zero. Still, Todoroki has the advantage. He can just keep shooting ice out all day long while Izuku's eventually going to get tired of chasing after him, Shiro said. Bakugo looked at the battle with intense interest and asked, "What are you, stupid?" Bakugo looked at his classmates, all of whom had a Cheshire grin on their faces, and remarked, "Nobody can use their quirks forever. Even I can lay down so many explosions before I'm exhausted. The same is true for Icy Hot. He's got a limit and Izuku will find it." He yelled angrily, "What the fuck are you guys smiling at?" While Tenya repositioned his glasses. Tenya inquired, "So it's fair to say you are rooting for Midoriya?" But Bakugo's forehead showed a vain pulse. "Fuck no. I don't give a damn about Izuku. He can lose or win, I don't care. Either way I'm going to be the overall winner, so that insect doesn't matter." Bakugo screamed as Denki laughed. Before Bakugo's smoking palm touched his face, the electric user remarked, "I don't know, you seem to have a lot of confidence in Izuku." Bakugo snarled, "You want to repeat that, you fucking battery?" As Denki violently shook his head upon realizing that all of their female classmates had gathered to watch Izuku's battle. As Izuku stood in front of him, Todoroki moved to the side to avoid a punch from Izuku, feeling the wind rip his shirt. Then, as he reached forward to take Izuku's arm, the One for All user spun on his heel and slammed his foot onto Shoto's shoulder, dropping him to the ground. Izuku stepped back and took a deep breath to regain his composure before saying, "You're slowing down, Todoroki. That ice is eating up your stamina." Izuku lifted his shirt to reveal a tiny nick on his side and remarked, "You could use your flames to stop it, but you won't, and that's why you're going to lose. This is the only thing you've done so far." As Todoroki stood up and glared at his green-haired opponent, Izuku yelled, "What you're doing now isn't going to cut it, and I won't sell for half your power. I want to know you gave it your all in order to win." Izuku rushed forward, slamming his foot to the ground as he slammed his full cowl fist into Todoroki's stomach, throwing him back, but not before Shoto managed to coat his arm in ice. "Did my dad put you up to this? Is he willing to bribe my opponent just to get his way?" Shoto yelled, racing towards Izuku. However, the accumulation of ice was slowing him down so much that it felt like he was moving in slow motion. As he looked up and saw Todoroki's next move approaching, Izuku hissed at the cold. However, he was able to avoid it and unleash another wind gust with his punch, almost knocking Shoto out of the ring before he made a chunk of ice to catch himself. Izuku landed with angry green eyes. Izuku yelled, "I didn't come here for this. I want your best," as he moved closer to Todoroki, who snarled. Izuku glared at Shoto when he said, "Why do you care so much if you can win like this? What's it matter if I give it my all?" Izuku yelled, "Because we both want to be heroes, right? Being a hero means giving it your all no matter what every day. If you don't, then you don't deserve to be here," and leapt towards Todoroki, who narrowly avoided the blow with an ice shield. He ducked to the side, looking up just in time to take a punch to the face as he fell away. "If you don't give it your all, you're insulting not only me, and yourself, but everyone who you fought before. They gave their all and here you are giving only half of yourself. What was the point of their sacrifice then?" "I will continue to reject him for what he's done," Shoto said, getting to his feet. "I won't give you or him the satisfaction of using his power." As Todoroki's heart pounded in his chest, Izuku yelled, "Don't give me that. It's not his power, it's yours. You use it for what you want. Only you can decide how to use that power to become the hero you want to be, not your dad or anyone else." "Shoto, you still aspire to be a hero?" Something in Shoto changed after hearing his mother's words and realizing that Izuku wasn't going to give up on this. Shoto exclaimed, "Okay, then if this is what you want, then I'll give it to you, because like you said I want to be a hero too." As steam from his left side melted the frost from his right. Amidst the crowd, Endeavor exclaimed, "Yes Shoto, that's it, unleash your true power," with a crazy smile. Present Mike questioned, "Oh well, what a doting father." Endeavor is right folks, but on a more pertinent note, Shoto Todoroki has for the first time since the festival started ignited his left side. How will things change now? Todoroki threw a swath of flames at Izuku, engulfing the boy in it until a hole was punched in the wall of flames, slamming into Todoroki's shoulder and spinning him to the left. As the flames subsided, it was discovered that Izuku's shirt was completely burned off, his arms were covered in black, and steam was arcing off him. Izuku told the crowd, "Full cowl, serpent style." Present Mike exclaimed, "What is this? Izuku's changed somehow. What is the secret of these blackened limbs?" As Izuku's class saw his new method for the first time. Bakugo clenched his fists in exasperation and asked, "So that's what he used to beat that Nomu thing, is it?" Tsuyu swallowed hard as she looked at Midoriya's body and said, "I never knew how muscular Midoriya was." Jiro, who was flushed and licking her lips, said, "Tell me about it." The guy looks like he was carved from marble. Mina rubbed her thighs together and said, he feels even better than he looks. Shoto gave Izuku a look, before launching a swath of ice at Izuku, who vanished just before it made contact and appeared at Shoto's left side with a cocked fist. Shoto remarked, well, Midoriya looks like I wasn't the only one holding back. Shoto blocked Izuku by shooting flames from his left side, but he was hit by a huge blow to the side that sent him reeling. To prevent Izuku from flying out of the ring, he pressed his right hand to the arena and called up a huge wall of ice. As Shoto watched his hands vanish into his wrist, Izuku cocked his fists and said, I had to know if you were going to give me your best before I could do the same. That was my Cobra Cannon. Shoto said, that's quite disturbing, Midoriya. Izuku then burst out laughing. Izuku hurried to Todoroki and said, Shishi, I thought so too at first, but your flames are really incredible, Todoroki. Even from here I can feel your heat, but now it's time to end this, wouldn't you say? Todoroki smiled and threw a huge swath of ice at Izuku, who easily evaded the attack by floating in midair before diving towards Shoto, who quickly created flames that melted all the ice. Cementos said, Midnight, this has gone too far, I'm stopping it now. He was concerned that the boys might suffer irreversible damage from these two close-range attacks. Izuku yelled, Twin Cobra Cannon. As the two closed in on each other, only to have a series of concrete slabs burst from the ground. At this point, Todoroki's massive fire attack broke the others, causing the entire stadium to erupt in light, sound, and wind. Izuku was unable to stop his attack, slamming his fists through the slabs. Cementos said, my goodness, a strong quirk doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a good hero, but these two are amazing. As the smoke cleared and they noticed Izuku pulling his arms out of the ring's concrete and Todoroki collapsed on the ring's floor. Present Mike exclaimed, what happened? How did this come about? As Aizawa responded, well, I didn't see it, but look at Todoroki's feet. Aizawa said, beckoning everyone to focus on Todoroki's ice-covered stadium floor. If you look closer at Todoroki's forehead you can see a bruise and blood. So in short, Todoroki ices himself to the floor to avoid being blown out of the ring by the attacks, while Izuku's attack somehow made it through the attack but was knocked off course by the blast and slammed into the ground, anchoring Izuku, who then drags himself towards Todoroki, ending things with a headbutt knocking his opponent unconscious. Aizawa said as Present Mike looked suspiciously at him. As Aizawa sighed at his friend's stupidity, Present Mike inquired, are you moonlighting as a detective or something, Eraser? As Izuku stood there, his body stinging from the perspiration running over the minor burns on his body, his chest heaving with every breath, Midnight exclaimed, thank you for that explanation, Eraserhead. The winner is Izuku Midoriya. He looked down at Shoto, who was gradually waking up, and sat up. Todoroki said, looks like it's my loss, Midoriya. He raised his hand to put it to his head, but Midoriya grabbed it and pulled him to his feet instead. Izuku shook Shoto's hand and said, that was a really tough fight, Todoroki, thank you. The other boy turned away. Before the two parted ways, he said, sure, whatever. As Shoto heard his father's voice, he stepped into the tunnel and glanced down at his left hand. You lost because you've neglected your flame training for too long, but I'm glad you've let this rebellion go and we can focus on your future. Once you graduate you'll work under me at my agency and I will make you into the next symbol of peace. Endeavor said while looking at Shoto. As he walked past his father, still pondering his choice to use his flames in his match with Midoriya, Shoto said, I haven't let go of anything. I just stopped thinking about you is all. I don't need you to obtain what I want for myself. In Recovery Girl's office, Midoriya sat on the examination table while the heroine applied ointment to his burns. As the door flew open, shocking the top hero enough to cough up blood, All Might remarked, you're really doing it, kid. You're so close to winning it all. Well done, young Midoriya. Yet again, you've exceeded my expectations, but the part I'm most proud of is how you refused to allow Todoroki to continue rejecting himself by rejecting half his power. It's that part of you that will lead you to be a great hero more than any of your powers. Tenya looked at his friend and adjusted his glasses before saying, Midoriya, that was amazing. The whole stadium can't stop talking about you. I'll have to confront your incredible power if I win my next match, Midoriya. It's frightening, but I'm also excited to challenge myself. As he was shoved aside, Tenya pondered. Minoru yelled, picturing a red and white Ghidorah and a green-haired Godzilla. Midoriya, what kind of monster are you? That match was like watching a kaiju battle. You two have ruined the stage beyond recognition, Mineta screamed. All right, that's enough. With all that noise, you three return to your seats. As the three boys departed, the Recovery Girl demanded. Well, Izuku, I have to leave you here because my match is coming up. As Iida entered his room, He shook hands with Midoriya and said, I'm looking forward to facing you afterwards, Midoriya. Izuku and Mineta returned to their seats before being encircled by their classmates, and Izuku said, looking forward to it, Iida. That's really manly, bro. I had no idea you were that ripped, Midoriya. You should spar with me sometime, Kirishima yelled. Leaning over the back of his seat, Kirishima remarked, taking hits like yours will definitely toughen my hardening. Izuku, it appears that you have been holding back during our matches, Ojiro said. I'm not sure if I should be appreciative or insulted. I need to join in on this now since you two have been training together, Kirishima said. Anyway, Midoriya, what was that power of yours? You looked really cool with all that black stuff on your arms and legs, Zero said. It is the mark of a shadow warrior. Tokiyami remarked. Midoriya has harnessed his inner darkness, but the other students' cries drowned out his voice. Kirishima, I would be delighted to spar with you. That power is simply another tool in my arsenal. Before President Mike interrupted to introduce Iida and Shiozaki, Izuku explained, I'm hardening my skin with the excess energy I have. Let's move on to our next match now that Cementos has rebuilt the stage following that devastating match. Tenya Iida's engine team from 1A and Abara Shiozaki. Our green goddess from 1B. President Mike yelled, to a chorus of applause. Start. After Midnight yelled, Iida sprinted across the cement, grabbed Shiozaki by the shoulders, and quickly dragged her out of the ring. Tenya Iida is the winner. Shiozaki is out of bounds, declared Midnight. What an incredible victory in a split second. Iida bowed to present Mike before leaving the stage, stiffening slightly as President Mike mentioned Hatsume. I suppose he was making up for his lackluster victory over Hatsume. Mina got to her feet, stretching a bit, and started to head for the waiting room before her match, but Ochako grabbed her hand and gave her a thumbs up, saying, Good luck, Mina. Mina grinned. I'll do my best, but I'm not sure how well I'll perform. As she departed to prepare for her match against Tokiyami, Mina gave her reassurance. That's odd, I thought there might be a conflict between the girls. Sato shrugged and said, they were really cold to each other, but now they're all chummy like nothing happened. Before Mineta could finish, Zero taped over his mouth and said, probably they're pairy. Dude, are you interested in dying a terrible death? As Mineta struggled to remove the tape from his mouth, Zero said, shaking his head, I mean Mina could literally melt you into a puddle, man. The match started with Mina using her agility to avoid Dark Shadow, but she was unable to close the distance before Dark Shadow forced her out of bounds with one blow. Izuku took some notes and muttered to himself, well, it happened as I thought it would. He shook his head and said, Tokiyami is just too much to deal with for most close combat specialists, and considering that Dark Shadow can act independently of Tokiyami's own action, any fight with him is practically 2-on-1. After all, he might be facing Tokiyami in the final match, depending on how things turned out. Bakugo vs Kirishima was the next match. Midoriya, who do you think will win? Kirishima has the advantage on defense because he can withstand Bakugo's explosion, Tenya said, glancing between the two fighters. But Bakugo's combat skills are comparable to yours, who has received formal training, so I'm not sure his hardening will be enough. Izuku nodded in response to Iida's assessment. The battle began, and Izuku said, yeah, Kirishima's win will hinge on if he can connect with a strong hit or outlast Bakugo's explosions. Bakugo won after unleashing a barrage of explosions against Kirishima, wearing down his hardening and knocking him out. Well, Iida, it looks like it's you and me next. Good luck. Before the two parted ways and reconnected in the arena, Izuku shook Iida's hand. It appears that 1A will perform well in the final 3 battles of the festival, with Katsuki Bakugo, Fumikage Tokiyami, and the 2 competitors present making up the final 4. Tenya Iida and Izuku Midoriya. I wonder how this match will end. President Mike asked as the 2 contestants turned to face each other. Start. The taller boy narrowly avoided landing on Iida's foot and bringing his leg down in an axe kick, which Izuku rolled out of the way to avoid, gaining his feet, and taking a kick to the stomach that sent him sliding back. Shouted Midnight as Iida shot forward at Midoriya, going for an engine-enhanced roundhouse that Izuku ducked under before kicking upward towards Iida's chin. Iida decided to use his Recipro burst and rush towards Midoriya, intending to grab hold and drag him out of the ring, but Izuku slid his foot forward, dropping low, to avoid Iida's grab and tripping him. Iida fell forward, and Midoriya grabbed his shirt and threw him over his shoulder. Iida's momentum took care of the rest, flying over Izuku and landing out of the ring. The victor is Izuku Midoriya, Midnight declared to the applauding audience. Observe that, ladies and gentlemen. Midoriya was able to heft and knock Iida out of the ring by using his opponent's speed against him. Is there anyone who can stop this child? Present Mike yelled as the two boys shook hands. Izuku grinned and said, "Good match, Iida. You kept me on my toes." Iida nodded. "I allowed you to take advantage of my overestimated speed," Tenya said. "Yet again, Midoriya, I've learned something from you." As they were leaving, Iida was returning to his seat after getting his phone out of the waiting area when his mother called. "Yes, mother, I'm sorry I didn't win." Iida replied to what he thought was his mother calling to comfort him over his loss, if only that were true. Instead of bothering Recovery Girl about it, Izuku rubbed his chest and walked back to his seat, confident that it would only be a bruise and that he should not worry about it. The second-to-last match was about to begin, and he didn't want to miss anything. He wasn't sure which of these two he wanted to face: Morei Bakugo, who would undoubtedly push him to the limit with what he now knew, or Tokiyami, who would keep him at a distance, forcing Izuku to counter with his own long-distance techniques. Either way, it would be a challenge, and that was exactly what Izuku wanted. With all the light Katsuki was generating during the match, it was obvious that Tokiyami was at a disadvantage. Izuku knew it was over when Katsuki used his new move, Stun Grenade, and that Bakugo would be his next opponent. Izuku clenched his fist in preparation for their rematch. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is the final match of the first year's sports festival. It's been quite a showing with upsets and over-the-top battles, but now it's come down to the final two. Who will win? It's all in their hands now. So let's welcome Izuku, Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo, Present Mike said as the two pupils left into the stadium. The rest of Class 1A was as quiet as a grave in the stands. They were all prepared for the most intense fight of the festival and understood the significance of this match for Izuku and Katsuki. Uraraka clenched her fists as she watched Izuku and Bakugo square off. The rematch between rivals. Bakugo's been waiting for this since the hero exercise. Each has something to prove and neither is willing to back down. Who do you believe will prevail? As each student gave their best guess, Shiro asked the entire class. Kirishima crossed his arms and said, "Izuku has power, but Bakugo has the advantage with his explosions, and in an area this large, Izuku can't rely on his ninja skills to get him out of this. It would have to be Bakugo." As he looked at the girls in his class and swallowed, Kirishima concluded, "This is a straight-up fight between men." He then felt a string of glares pierce his back. "How could you have missed Midoriya's altercation with Todoroki?" Sato responded, receiving a thumbs up from the class's female students. "I'd say he's got more than power going for him, and just because he's trained as a ninja doesn't mean he can go toe-to-toe in an all-out battle." Slumped down in his chair, Minoru uttered, "They're both guys, so I don't care." "Then keep your mouth shut." I would have to agree with Kirishima Bakugo that he is a monster. I don't know anyone who is as freakishly aggressive during a fight, and he picks up on his opponents quickly, Kaminari said. Denki said, "Sad to say Izuku can't compare," following a similar stare-down to Kirishima, after which he quickly ducked behind Shoji. Mina smiled at her friends and said, "Don't worry girls, Midori's got this, and even if he doesn't win, we can console him, if you know what I mean." Mina's words made all the girls blush. "Though even if he does win, we can still celebrate together." Mina was kicking back in preparation for the show. "Oh, I do recall that child. Raph, didn't you give him a little smack around?" Donnie said, glancing up from his most recent support item to see who Midoriya would be up against. "Yes, the kid who exploded. He was merely yelling outside the dojo that Izuku was a loser and that Izuku ought to fight him. I told him to get lost because I couldn't focus, and he slapped me across the face." Raph snarled and slammed his fist into his hand, saying, "Little shit. I taught him a lesson. Looks like Izuku's about to get some payback for all the crap that kid put him through." "That's sufficient, Raphael." Raphael sat down after Master Splinter reprimanded him, saying, "It is not Hamato to fight for vengeance." Returning to the TV, Raph apologized, "Sorry Dad." With a picture of sake in his head, Splinter thought, "I hope you remember that too, Izuku. You don't want to use your power to get back at people. That only leads to selfish and destructive ends." "So it's Katsuki you're fighting," Inko said, sitting with her fists clenched as she gazed at the screen. Taking a deep breath, Inko said, "Go for it, Izuku. I believe in you. I know I shouldn't hold a grudge, but I'm still mad at him for trying to bully you, Izuku. But I know that's not the reason you're going to beat him. This is it, you fucking nerd. Time to put you in your place once and for all," Izuku said, standing in front of Katsuki, who was grinning viciously. Izuku grinned as Katsuki growled and popped off explosions in both hands, saying, "That thing in training was just a fluke and I'll show you now." Izuku took a stance and said, "We'll see Katsuki, but I don't feel like I'm going to lose." They both looked at each other. Start. O0M5D50AD4. List equals RDO0M5D50AD4, shouted Midnight. Katsuki exploded upward into the air, then shot downward towards Izuku, his hand forward creating an explosion that went off as soon as he made contact with Izuku. The smoke cleared, revealing Izuku in his serpent cowl, his blackened fist having clashed with Katsuki's, taking the brunt of the explosion. Katsuki dropped to the ground, reaching forward with another explosion, which Izuku parried, causing it to explode harmlessly to his side, then punched forward, which caused Katsuki to explode himself up and over Izuku's punch, landing behind him and turning on his heel with another explosion. Izuku did the same with a loaded Cobra cannon, and both attacks collided, setting off another explosion, blowing both back. The smoke cleared, revealing Izuku in the same stance he had taken when facing Nomu, with his left hand out, palm out, his right arm drawn back, and his hand fully engulfed in his forearm. Katsuki slid back on his feet, dropping his arms as a hole appeared in the smoke cloud, and he felt something smash into his stomach, driving the air from him as he flew back towards the edge of the ring, only managing to stop himself with an explosion to keep himself in the ring. Katsuki narrowed his eyes, taking in everything about Izuku's stance, and then he stood up straight and rushed forward, but before he had taken even 3 steps, he was hit in the stomach again, causing him to hunch over and grip his abdomen as if he had been hit by a cannonball. Katsuki could barely keep up with Izuku's movement as he looked around him, zigzagging across the ring, and then behind him. Bakugo dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding another Cobra cannon, and released an explosion, blasting Izuku backwards, but instead of gaining distance, Bakugo pressed his attack, rushing after Izuku and blasting him repeatedly backwards. This has been going on non-stop since the beginning, man. It's difficult to determine who is in control of this situation as Izuku and Bakugo are slapping each other back and forth and the tables are turning like a top. Eraserhead, what do you think? Present Mike inquired as he observed Aizawa closely observing the game. When Aizawa saw Izuku standing at the edge of the ring with Bakugo in front of him, he responded bluntly, I say things have yet to get serious. This stopped Izuku from moving forward. Izuku wiped soot from his cheek, raised his hands in front of him, and changed his stance. Bakugo saw this right away and went in for the kill. I know he's got some stupid trick up his sleeve, but I won't let him psych me out. Bakugo thought as he advanced. It's over, Izuku, I've got you cornered, give up, or don't so I can keep blasting you. Bakugo growled. Ojiro nodded in comprehension in the stands, and Shoji noticed. What is it, Ojiro? You seem to know something. Ojiro grinned and started to clarify. To be honest, Izuku's best option is now on the defensive. Although Bakugo has him boxed in, he is adopting a posture known as the tornado stance. Shoji nodded in agreement as Ojiro explained. It emphasizes defense via avoidance and evasion, letting your opponent work themselves raw while conserving your own momentum and stamina. Looking back at the match, Shoji agreed, I would say that's the perfect thing against Bakugo's aggressive assault. Bakugo pressed his palm forward, but Izuku sidestepped, and Bakugo threw a kick, only to have it parried away, as Izuku danced on the edge of the ring, avoiding or redirecting Bakugo's explosions to the annoyance of the explosion user. Stop running, you bastard! With a shout, Katsuki reached forward, but Izuku knocked his palm off course, causing a huge explosion. Izuku was able to slip behind Katsuki, who quickly turned around to discover that Izuku had left, having stayed behind Bakugo to throw another Cobra cannon to Bakugo's back, sending the blonde back to the middle of the ring. Bakugo stood up and looked at Izuku. Both of them were breathing heavily, and Katsuki noticed something and grinned. You're almost out of juice. He made a comment about how much of that dark stuff Izuku had lost since the match started, stating that it was now in the middle of his forearms instead of up to his shoulders. Izuku nodded and panted, saying, yeah, this is pretty taxing on my body, but you're in no better shape. He threw his arms back as far as they would go, corkscrewing as they did so, and then rushed towards Bago, the ring cracking under the speed of his footfalls. I haven't really tested this technique out, and I'm not sure I can control it, but it's my best shot at finishing this, Izuku thought to himself as Katsuki exploded into the air before coming down towards Izuku, setting off explosions to throw him into a spiral as he came down on Izuku, who slammed his foot into the ground, cracking it under his step as he pulled his arm towards him, feeling it heat up before igniting as he threw it up towards Bakugo. Izuku shouted. Bakugo grinned and glanced at his opponent's flaming fist. That's the way it is, so let's get started, Izuku. Howitzer impact. For the second and final time that day, the arena erupted in smoke, wind, and noise as the two attacks collided. The ring broke apart, sending large pieces of stone flying across the field as hot wind blasted into the stands, burning lungs. Mineta, who had barely been paying attention, was blown upward and was barely caught by Shoji before she was nearly thrown out of the arena as the walls began to shake and crack from the force of the two attacks. What's up with your students, Eraserhead? This place has already been on the verge of destruction twice. Please have pity on Midnight and poor Cementos down there, Present Mike spoke while adjusting his glasses and glancing at Aizawa, who just sat there gazing at the enormous smoke plume before the window of their commentator box broke due to the explosion's force. As he looked back at the smoke, Kamui Woods shook his head and said, they were worried about getting attacked by villains were in more danger from the students than anything else. It took a minute for the smoke to clear, revealing the battle's outcome, which shocked everyone. Bakugo stood in the center of the ring, with two long furrows running from where Izuku had been standing all the way to the ring's outer wall, where Izuku stood knee-deep in two deep troughs before collapsing forward. And our winner is Katsuki Bakugo, instead of Midnight, who had been blasted into the stands to the glee of a number of male onlookers. I am Haria to present the awards to our top students in this festival. All Might will drop into the arena from the sky to present the awards, but it took some time before the arena was made presentable again for the ceremony. As Bakugo, Tokiyami, and Midoriya were introduced, All Might flexed. Iida was called away because of a family emergency, but technically he would have been here too, sharing third place with Tokiyami. You have to cherish those familial ties, don't you? You may have lost this time, but learn from this, Midnight said, winking as All Might approached Tokiyami to give him the bronze medal and an embrace. All Might said to Tokiyami, who bowed, try not to rely on your quirk too much and strengthen your foundation to overcome unfavorable odds in the future. Seeing the bronze medal, Tokiyami replied, I will take your words to heart, All Might. He was aware of how much harder he had to work. Don't let this get you down, kid. You came out and showed everyone what you had, and the world took notice, All Might said with a smile as he walked over to Izuku, gave him the silver medal, and gave him a hug. After saying, I'm proud of you, All Might walked over to Katsuki, who took the medal, pulled it over his head, and turned to face Izuku. Izuku, I promise to beat you. We're even now, and I'm going to pull ahead of you even more. Izuku turned to face Katsuki as he yelled. I'll just put in more effort and get ahead of you even more after that. I won't allow you to outpace me any longer because we are currently tied. As Katsuki smiled and glared at Izuku, Izuku yelled. Katsuki's only answer was, you don't stand a chance, Izuku. All Might considered interrupting the two, but saw how they were behaving. This wasn't Katsuki's typical hostility toward Izuku. Rather, it was a new rivalry. Ha ha ha. You two embody youth. Allow that to propel you toward your goals. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the students and staff for their efforts. Thank you for all your hard work. Plus Ultra. The audience erupted in protest of All Might's deceptive remarks, ending the sports festival. Mikey was about to call in the order when Raph shook his head. Aw man, that sucks. I thought Izuku would win it all. Oh well. Guess I'll have to get him an extra big pizza. I wonder if they make triple XL pizzas. Leo turned to Master Splinter, who grinned at the screen, and Raph said, damn well he did his best, I'll only give him one punch for losing. Raph then left for the dojo. Yoshi got up and popped his back, and Leo said, you seem pleased, Master. I am Leonardo. I've never asked for you boys to win every fight you're in, just that you give your all, and that's what Izuku did. Whether he won or lost, I'm still proud of him, Yoshi said as he left. Inko pouted a little while sitting on the couch. She had wanted her little boy to win, but she quickly got over her snobbish demeanor and grinned. Then she coughed. You did a good job, Izuku. Tonight is your night, she exclaimed. Her throat had been severely damaged by all of that applause. I need a cough drop. Izuku had returned home to the largest gathering he had ever witnessed. Splinter, his mother, and his brothers were present. He had placed second in the sports festival, and everyone had come to celebrate. Before Splinter and his sons and daughter left, the night had been a wild one. After that, Izuku promptly climbed into bed and slept until nearly noon the following day. His phone was blinking on his dresser when he sat up. He began by seeing a number of texts from Mina, Ochako, and Toru. While they varied, they were all congratulating him on his tournament placement for the most part. He stood up and stretched while grinning and rearranging his hair. At that moment, he read Mina's final text, in which she asked him to visit her home as soon as possible. Considering the time, he made the decision to take a shower and finish his morning routine before stopping for a bite to eat on the way to Mina's house. When he got up to go, he saw the message light on the house phone, but his mother was still asleep. Curious, He pushed it to hear what it had to say, and to his surprise, his father's voice came through. Hey Izuku, I'm sure you're probably asleep by now, but I just wanted to let you know I did see the sports festival and just wanted to say how proud I am of you. I wish I could be there to see the kind of man you're growing into, or should I say what kind of hero you're becoming. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of you Izuku, and I love you. The conversation ended there as Izuku continued to wipe tears from his eyes. As he left to see Mina, he muttered, "Thanks Dad," in the hopes that he would have time to gather himself before arriving. Izuku was stopped by a crowd of people swarming around him as he was jogging to Mina's house. An older man shook his head and said, "Wow, it's you from the sports festival, Midoriya, right? That was amazing. You kid have potential," as a number of children seized his legs. One boy exclaimed, "You were awesome, mister." The boy excitedly yelled, mimicking Izuku's movements, "Yeah, I want to be like you when I get to high school. You were all like bam, and whoosh, and zing." "Oh well, thanks, I just did what I could to win." He rubbed the back of his head and excused himself, waving at the crowd as he jogged to Mina's house. His face was red with shame as he approached the door and knocked, and it was flung open, dragging him inside with the 6 girls from his class surrounding him. As they all turned to face him, he questioned, "What's going on?" Mina stood behind him, rubbing his shoulders while she glanced at the girls in front of the two of them. "You know exactly what's going on, Midori. I told you I'd make everything alright, and now I have." As Izuku nodded, Mina petted his fluffy green head and said, "First off, the girls have something to say to you, so could you just listen to them all before answering?" He said, "Sure thing Ashidua, I mean Mina," as Mina corrected him by pulling his ear. Uraraka took a deep breath and stepped forward, while Mina stepped back and said, "Good, so I suppose Ochako should go first." "Izuku, I know about what you and Mina did, and I'm not mad." "Well, I was, but that was because I was jealous of Mina having you first, and that jealousy made me doubt you, and for that I'm sorry. I thought you couldn't love me after going so far with Mina, but it was because of Mina that I realized how big your heart is, and I know you have room for Mina and myself, so if you're okay with it, I would like to be your girlfriend alongside Mina." Izuku was about to respond to Ochako's outrageous statement, but Mina covered his mouth when he turned to face her. Izuku nodded when Mina reminded him, "You promised to listen until the end, remember?" Ochako moved aside to make room for Toru, who turned to face Izuku. "Izuku, I love you. It started when you saved me that day, and grew the longer we were together until I couldn't contain it anymore. Even right now my heart's so full of love it feels like it might burst, and I don't want to stop loving you even if that means you won't be mine alone. So will you let me be your girlfriend too?" Toru asked before pulling back to be replaced by Asuyu, who was beaming. "Ribbit. I am not very good at expressing my emotions, so I just wind up saying things in a blunt manner, so I'll just come out and say it. Izuku, I like you a lot. I didn't know how much until I saw you at the USJ. You placed your faith in me with no hesitation and then put your own life on the line to save me and Mineta without a second thought. Your courage to face insurmountable odds leaves me breathless, and I want to stay by your side now and forever." Jiro stepped forward, twirling her earlobe as she blushed and danced back and forth to Izuku, while Suyu retreated. Normally, Jiro was the coolest person in the room, but Izuku was so taken aback by her shy demeanor that he swallowed in an attempt to restore some moisture to his mouth. Mina grinned behind him. "The girl doesn't realize how adorable she is when she lets herself be herself, but I knew Jiro would show up." As Jiro spoke, Mina pondered. Then Jiro backpedaled and exhaled, saying, "Well, I like you all right. I didn't think much of you when we first met, kind of struck me as a goody two-shoes, not that that's a bad thing." As the other girls stared at her with a single thought in their heads, she stepped back and said, "Look, I like you, and this drive you have to make everyone around you a better person, and I want to be a better person around you, so let me be with you all right." What a train wreck that was. The last person to speak was Momo, who straightened her posture and coughed as though she were addressing the World Embassy, but her internal conflict was evident from the pink dust on her cheeks. "Midori, much like Jiro, didn't think much of you. Someone who does things without thinking of the consequences and has romanticized the hero profession, but after working alongside you I can see that my perception of you is truly flawed, and for that I'm sorry," Momo said, bowing her large bust and jiggling it she was doing so. The other girls in the room noticed Izuku's eyes widening. Izuku swallowed as he gazed at the assembled girls as Mina walked in front of him. "Seeing how hard you work every day for our class and to achieve your dream is something to marvel at. It inspires me to do more and be better, and I know that together on a more personal level we will grow and mature even more. I want us to be better together." Mina said, swallowing. This was her gambit after all, and if it didn't work, it would all be her fault. "And there you have it, Midori. We all have deep feelings for you, but we wanted it to be your decision. I know this is a lot to take in, and if you don't feel the same about any of us, we'll understand. As the girls held hands in front of the man they loved, Mina remarked, whatever you decide, we'll accept it no matter what. Izuku's mind was racing. He had never considered this in any of his forecasts. Strangely, he was more composed than ever before, even though he had expected to be more agitated about this spilling all over himself. He stood up and grinned brilliantly, lighting up everyone's worlds. You all came to this decision together, putting the well-being of the group over personal preferences. I can't turn that down. I don't think I deserve this, but I'll do my best to be the man you deserve, that all of you deserve. The 6 girls yelled, Izuku, as they threw themselves at him, kissing him on the lips. Class A members were gathered that Monday to share their weekend experiences and the fact that they were frequently recognized by passers-by. Bakugo turned to face Izuku again. Bakugo gleefully made fun of Izuku, who had been deep in thought until he heard his gruff voice, asking, "What's up, first loser?" He had been looking at Iida, with whom he had spoken before class. Izuku was putting on his shoes when Tenya entered the school building, and he went over to inquire about his brother Ingenium. Ingenium was hospitalized after being attacked by a villain during the sports festival. Tenya turned to smile at Izuku, who said, "Hey Iida, is your brother doing okay?" Izuku sighed. It was clear that Iida was trying to hide his pain, but he didn't feel comfortable probing into such a private matter. "Thank you for asking, Midoriya, and yes, my brother will make a speedy recovery. I'm sorry to have worried you and for not being able to congratulate you on your second-place win. I hear it was quite the battle." However, Bakugo would not allow him to forget his recent loss, so he would now have to put up with his gloating. This was how things were going to be for a while. Izuku politely asked, "Nothing, how about you, Katsuki?" without expressing how much Bakugo's gloating was bothering him. This only served to enrage Bakugo, who promptly turned around and ignored Izuku's question as Aizawa entered, fully recovered. As Aizawa waved his hand, Toru clapped and said, "Mr. Aizawa, you're all better now." The class exploded at this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Recovery Girl went overboard on her healing, but yes, I'm fully recovered, but enough about my physical health. Time for Hero Informatics, in which you will be picking out your codenames for hero work. They had the opportunity to leave their mark on the world right now. As he started to explain, Aizawa said, "Okay, calm down." Before publishing each student's number of recommendations, Aizawa stated, "Normally you'd be doing this much later, but due to the overwhelming number of offers from the sports festival, it has been decided each of you should pick out a codename for your upcoming internships." The top student, who stunned the entire class, caught everyone's attention. Izuku was the one who had the most recommendations, which infuriated Katsuki right away. While Midoriya grinned and shrugged, Bakugo yelled, "What, the you came in second place and yet you got more offers than me? How'd you do it, Izuku?" With a smirk that made Katsuki's bones ache, he remarked, "I guess I just put on a better show." Must have been all those crazy battles Midoriya was in. After all, he was part of both matches that nearly destroyed the stadium and kept first place through 2 events. It's only natural that he'd have more offers, Bakugo. Kirishima clarified, but Katsuki was even more incensed as he sat there fuming at his desk. When the door opened and Aizawa waltzed in, she said, "Even though having more offers is better, those who didn't get any will still gain workplace experience, but now that you understand what's going on, I'll leave you in the hands of Midnight to help you create your names." As Midnight walked behind Aizawa's desk, the owner had already crawled into a sleeping bag. "Yes, I wouldn't want any of you to be stuck with a name that is obscene," she said, licking her lips. "Now then, students, you have 15 minutes to pick out a hero name which you will then come up and announce to the class. You can always change these names later before you graduate, but the name should be special to you and what you want to say to the world each time someone says or hears your name." Midnight clarified as each pupil started to write. Izuku jotted down and ruled out a number of possibilities before giving them more thought. He wrote down the name he wanted in order to honor the parts of One for All that would benefit him later on, in addition to wanting something for himself. Aoyama, whose name was shortened from I Cannot Stop Twinkling to Can't Stop Twinkling, was the first student to come forward and give their name. Mina's name was changed from Alien Queen to Pinky. Having Sue as Froppy, Kirishima as Red Riot, Jiro as her quirk Earphone Jack, Shoji as Tentacle, and Siro as Cellophane seemed to make things go more smoothly after these first 2 hiccups. Izuku felt a little let down by Ojiro's decision to go with Tailman, but he shrugged, acknowledging that it was clear and difficult to ignore. Sato chose Toru's name, Sugarman, and Denki called himself Chargebolt. Izuku smiled at Invisible Girl, another on-the-nose name, but he thought it was cute. According to Izuku, Momo would refer to herself as Krieta, which is another adorable name. Todoroki decided to use his given name Shoto, and Tokiyami came up with the really hip name Tsukuyomi, which Midnight seemed to completely approve of. Fortunately, Minetta's name choice of Grapejuice was not perverse, and Koji went with Anima. The situation changed when Bakugo, of course, wanted to include murder in his hero name. This was immediately rejected, and Uraraka then decided on the name Uravity. It fit her, Izuku thought, but he felt it was a lost chance because of what everyone called her before they knew her name following the ball throw. Uraraka would make a fantastic Infinity Girl. He smiled as he thought to himself. Izuku was taken aback when Tenya used his first name, Shoto. I was certain that Iida would call himself Ingenium, but I suppose he didn't want to adopt his brother's name as though the original Ingenium had vanished because his brother was not yet fully recovered. Concerned about his friend, Midoriya thought, and then it was his turn. Izuku approached the desk and said something. He turned his board to reveal his name and pondered why he had chosen it. Our names are supposed to be our mark on the world, telling people what kind of good we can do, so with that in mind, I wanted a name that showed people my hero way, that I'm a force for good and a servant of justice, so my name will be J-Force, he said. It just seemed right for some reason. Izuku blushed, and several eyes pinned him to the wall. The most unexpected of these was Mineta, who followed Izuku back to his seat while glaring at him jealously. What a fantastic name, Midoriya, it makes my whole body shiver with passion. Midnight exclaimed, wrapping her arms around herself and twisting back and forth. Bakugo sulked in his seat over his rejected names, but Midnight pointed out that all those names were marvelous choices, well except one. As she departed, Midnight yelled, wear them proudly while doing your internships, and with that I am out of here. Wake up, Shota. Aizawa sat up angrily, but the bell rang just in time for him to go back to sleep as the students left for lunch. Ochako followed Izuku as he got up from his desk and started to head for the door. Ochako said, hey Deku, want to eat lunch with me and the girls? But before Izuku could respond, someone shouted from a corner. Izuku turned to see All Might in buff form, waving him over with a relatively small lunchbox. All Might asked, wanna have lunch? And Ochako sputtered with laughter at the hero's query. Izuku turned to face the girls who had waved him away as he went to speak with All Might, who escorted him back to the lounge, where a big pile of papers stood with a single sheet beside it. As the hero transformed back into his true form, Izuku sat down across from All Might and asked, what's going on, All Might? Is something wrong? As Izuku swallowed in anticipation of a potentially life-altering choice, All Might said, stop worrying so much, everything is fine, in fact it's more than fine, which is why I called you in here. There's a decision I need you to make. All Might pushed the foot-tall pile of papers in Izuku's direction and said, it's about your internship offers. This stack of papers is all the heroes who want you to intern at their agencies. As Izuku gazed at the pile of documents as though he had discovered the Holy Grail, All Might remarked, you'll find offers from some of the top heroes in Japan. From Best Jeanist, Kamui Woods, I think I even saw an offer from Endeavor in there. Izuku questioned, why, you mean all these heroes want me? All Might nodded. Exactly, any of these heroes could give you a clear shot at being the symbol of peace, not to mention the experience of working alongside one of the top 10 pros. Now this is the crux of our conversation. On this page is the internship I most think you should accept. I know it's not my place, but I believe that this internship will be the best in terms of training your new abilities. It's with my old friend David Shield on I Island. Izuku's eyes nearly popped out of his head upon Might's confession. The man who makes all your costumes and equipment, David Shield. He wants me to come to I Island for training? Izuku exclaimed, his heart thumping in his chest at this fantastic chance. As Izuku lifted the first few pages of the list of offers, allowing each one to fall back into place before accepting the offer from I Island, All Might said, yes, I asked him to watch the sports festival and he found you interesting enough to put in an offer. The question is, which will you take? On the one hand, you can gain an early foothold in the hero world as the intern of a popular hero, or you can travel to I Island and gain more experience and training with your new power, or even discover a new one. The choice is yours. Izuku pushed the tower of other offers back towards All Might, who grinned and bowed, saying, if you say this is better for my personal growth as the future symbol of peace, All Might, then I have no reason to doubt you. I will take the internship at I Island. Izuku grinned as All Might sat back up and said, I know it was selfish of me to put forth my own opinion on something that affects your future, but I am grateful you went with my choice. Izuku stood up, All Might imitating him, and said, laughing a little, wasn't it you who told me that helping even where you're not wanted is the essence of being a hero? All Might waved his finger at Izuku, who nodded and rubbed the back of his head. I suppose I was. I'll take care of setting everything up. I'm sure Aizawa told you that the internship will last for a week starting next Monday, so I'll be sure to get a flight for us that Sunday. Until then, don't go too crazy with your training, okay? All Might said. Sure thing, All Might. In fact, I was planning on using the rest of this work to take it easy, get out and do something fun. All Might gave a nod. All Might and Izuku shook hands before leaving, with Izuku grinning. That's good, young Midoriya. Rest is just as important as proper exercise. It's good for both mind and body to relax. I fully endorse this idea. All Might said. All Might handed Izuku the lunchbox he had been holding and remarked, "Oh, and here, have this. It's not like I can do much with it." As he walked away and started to reflect, Izuku said, "Thanks, All Might. I want to have fun with my 6 girls. Oh my god, where do I start?" Izuku examined himself in a nearby storefront window to make sure he was looking his best. Given that Momo was an upper-class girl and that this would be his first date with her, he couldn't afford to make a poor impression. Gazing at his finest attire, he let out a sigh. In addition to wearing black dress pants and a button-down shirt with white and green checkers, he even cleaned his red sneakers until they resembled new. Before turning to see Momo wearing a salmon-colored sundress with white sandal heels, he said, "I hope she likes this." He then heard heels clicking against the pavement. She wore her hair down her back in a thick braid rather than in her typical ponytail. She stopped in front of him, and he grinned as he looked at her. Izuku swallowed as he took in Momo Yaoyorozu's perfection. He smiled at her and remarked, "Why, you look good, Yaoyorozu, that dress really suits you." Momo blushed as she observed Izuku's attire. She appreciated that he hadn't dressed up too much for her. Instead of allowing their financial status to control their evening, she wanted this to be a natural relationship between them. She smiled and blushed for a moment before saying, "As do you, Midoriya, you cut quite the figure." As Izuku coughed, she stroked her braid and said, "I was surprised to get your call, but happy. What did you have in mind for our DD date?" Uncertain if such a thing would meet Momo's standards, he said, Well, I was hoping we could maybe take a walk on the beach." Momo blushed and smiled. Momo remarked, "That sounds wonderful, Midoriya." He was secretly pleased that he didn't try to impress her by going all out, but rather by doing something straightforward but sincere. As the daughter of a wealthy family, she frequently received material presents that were thoughtless. She hoped Izuku wouldn't do that, and it appears he didn't. Izuku grinned and extended his arm to her, which Momo accepted. The two of them walked arm in arm through the city on their way to Dagoba Beach. Momo gazed at the pristine water and white sand. When they stepped onto the sand, she was surprised to see a blanket with a picnic basket on it next to the water. "I'd heard that the beach had been cleared recently, but I never knew it would look this beautiful," she said. Izuku was blushing at his offering when Momo turned to face him. He rubbed the back of his head and said, "I know it's not much, but I thought a picnic on the beach would be nice." Momo grinned broadly, hugged him, and buried her face in his chest. Izuku yelled, "Why, Yaoyorozu?" before Momo drew back and gave him a look. As she knelt to remove her shoes and felt the warm, soft beach sand beneath her feet, she muttered, "Call me Momo." She then sat down to attend the picnic while Izuku followed suit. Momo saw Izuku wilt before shaking her hand and said, "You know I don't get simple things like this often. No, don't take it the wrong way. I've lived most of my life in the lap of luxury, so much so that things like a simple picnic are a novelty to me. The experience of sharing a meal across a blanket underneath the sky and listening to the sound of the ocean, it's so special to me." Momo touched Izuku's hand. She said, "Thank you so much, Izuku. This is just perfect." Izuku grinned, relieved that he hadn't completely messed up. He took a big bento box out of the basket and said, "No problem, Momo, and please call me Izuku." He displayed a dozen rice balls that were cooked to perfection and remarked, "I'm not a great cook, but I'm pretty good at some things. These 4 are stuffed with strawberry preserves. These are filled with chicken and the final 4 have cheese in them. I know it's weird, but trust me, I think you'll like it," he said as both of them took a rice ball. Momo picked up the cheese-filled rice ball after glancing at the others. When Momo took a bite, she discovered that it was really tasty. As Izuku flushed, Momo remarked, "Class representative, all-around good guy, and now Chef my Izuku, how many hats do you wear?" As he leaned back to enjoy the view of the sea and the scent of the salt, he remarked, "Oh, it's just something I picked up from one of my mom's cooking shows is all. I think the chef's name is Megumi something or other." As he took out a thermos and poured them each a cup of tea, Izuku asked, "So Momo, who'd you choose for your internship?" Momo accepted the offer with gratitude. Momo's happiness diminished a little at Izuku's inquiry. Izuku grinned as Momo remarked, "I only got one, from the heroine Uwabami." He nodded, thrilled that Momo had received such a good offer. That's great. Uwabami is a high-profile heroine who specializes in rescue missions. I think you can learn a lot from her, especially when it comes to dealing with the public. Momo shook her head, looking at Izuku. You could see the bright side to a hurricane, couldn't you? That's what I love about you, Izuku. You're always looking up at something better. I know you got a lot of recommendations. Have you decided who you're going to apprentice under? Izuku smiled as he made the decision. Momo raised an eyebrow when Izuku said, I'll be going to Island to apprentice under David Shield. David Shield, he's the man who makes all Might's support gear and costumes, right? Why would you go there? I mean, wouldn't field experience with a pro hero be better? Momo asked with a smirk. Izuku looked at his fist and then up at the sunset. Normally I'd agree with you, but I only recently got my quirk and I'm steadily finding out more uses and applications for it. I think it would be better to go to a scientist like David Shield who could help me understand and utilize my quirk to its fullest. I may miss out on fieldwork, but in the end mastering myself should be my first priority. Izuku then hugged Momo to his chest and kissed her on the lips. Sitting up, she looked into his green eyes and said, When you say things like that I just can't help myself. I just want to wish you good luck on your internship and I'll be waiting to see you when you get back, but I won't be the same Momo you knew before. I intend to make the most of my time with Uwabami to become a better partner to you. Izuku grinned as he touched her braid. Before they kissed again, he said, Thanks Momo. Izuku watched Momo enter the front gate and gazed at the enormous mansion before him. This location is enormous. Izuku tried to conceal his surprise as he thought. Momo looked at Izuku's face and laughed. As Izuku headed home, she kissed his cheek and said, Maybe we can have our date here next time. I'd really like to show you around. She then went inside. Izuku ended up in a clothes store the following day, but it appeared to target a specific demographic, fans of rock music. He turned to face Jiro, who was dressed in boots, jeans with torn knees, and a blue shirt without sleeves. The rocker girl smiled and he said, Jiro, what are we doing here? She grabbed his arm and drew him in, saying, We're updating your look, Izuku, and there's no better place than here. Izuku was obviously completely out of his element here. It was astounding how many leather goods were available. Izuku could no longer see what was happening. All he knew was that Jiro was pushing him into a dressing room while he piled clothes into his arms at a swift pace. Okay, take this and this. Oh, this is really cool, Jiro said. Before opening the curtain, Izuku grabbed one of the enormous piles of clothes on the bench and tried it on. Try these on and we'll see what works. How's this? He inquired as Jiro examined him. Izuku wore a red t-shirt with twin guitars across it, fingerless gloves, and black jeans with nothing but ragged thread at the hem of each leg. Izuku closed the curtain and then opened it again, this time wearing a leather jacket with shoulder studs, a black t-shirt, and blue jeans. Jiro remarked, Nah, I'm not feeling it next. Jiro shook her head once more. Next. Izuku closed the door and opened it once more, wearing sunglasses, toe-spiked boots, jeans, and a leather vest. After putting a finger to her chin, Jiro grinned and held up the gloves from the previous outfit as well as the jacket and shirt from the previous one. She looked at Izuku and reached up to touch his untidy hair, ruffling it a little before saying, I think we have a winner. Looking into Izuku's eyes, which were as green as emeralds, she said, You should grow your hair out. Izuku asked, Jiro, is there something wrong? And Jiro shook her head. She pushed Izuku back into the dressing room and closed the curtain to conceal her blush as she went to pay for the clothes, with Izuku joining her shortly after. No, nothing's wrong. Come on, get dressed, and I'll pay for these, then we can go to the next place. Jiro merely shook her head when Izuku's insistence that, Jiro, I could have paid for those. She tossed the bag of clothes to him and said, Nope, I wanted to buy them for you so I did. Don't read so much into it, now come on. She then escorted him to a different mall store that wasn't as far from his comfort zone. It was an instrument store. Izuku examined every musical instrument in front of him, including piccolos and saxophones. As Jiro turned around holding a guitar, Izuku said, Jiro, I don't know how to play any of these. As she walked to the soundproof room at the back of the store, she said, Yeah, I figured as much, that's why I'm going to teach you. Izuku felt a little more at ease knowing that only Jiro would hear his awful playing. Here we can test out the instruments and you don't have to worry about anyone hearing how bad you may play. He sat down in the chair and Jiro put the guitar in his lap. Okay, I'll give it a try. I always wanted to learn to play an instrument. She took hold of his hands, positioned them correctly, and then spread his fingers with her own, saying, That's the spirit, it's not as hard as it looks, I promise. She stood behind him with her chest against his back, coaching him through a few notes until Izuku quickly grasped the concept. See, now you've got it, now repeat after me, she said, keeping her face inches from his. He was undoubtedly not a savant, but he picked things up quickly. Izuku stood up and laughed as she said, "Well, look at you, you'll be pulling a band together in no time." As soon as he heard Jiro stop laughing, he said, "Yeah, maybe I'll write you a love song or something." He gazed at the girl's red face and wide eyes. Izuku tilted his head to the side and she whispered, "Are really?" Jiro crossed her arms and turned away when he said, "Yeah, why wouldn't I? You're my girlfriend and you obviously love music, so I figured it'd be something nice I could do for you, should I not?" Izuku approached her and gently rubbed her head after she said, Do what I want, I just wanted to share something with you." As she vibrated against his chest, he hugged her and said, "You know it's okay to ask me for stuff, Jiro. I'm yours, remember, I'd do anything for you." Izuku nodded, and she whispered to his chest, Please make a love song for me." As the two of them walked out of the music store, he said, laughing a little, "One love song for my girlfriend coming up." Jiro remarked as Izuku walked her home, "So Island Hun, that's great, Izuku. I'm going to be interning under Death Arms." Jiro blushed as they got closer to her house, so she stopped Izuku and kissed him while standing on her tiptoes. "That's really cool, Jiro. Death Arms is a great hero and he's a rising star right alongside Kamui Woods. You'll get a lot of hands-on experience, I bet," Izuku said joyfully. As Jiro poured her passion into the intimate act, Izuku wrapped his arms around him. She then pulled back, puffing her breath against Izuku's chest while gazing up at him through her lashes. As she walked the remaining distance home and entered her house, Jiro said, "Remember your promise, Mr. Bigshot." Izuku put his hand in his pockets and grinned. As he made his way home, he remarked, "I guess I had better start practicing." The location for his date with Sue was probably the most serene one he had chosen, even though Jiro had arranged their date on her own. He noticed Sue coming toward him wearing a white t-shirt and a green skirt. Her green hair was styled in twin ponytails at the back. He grinned as she approached him while glancing at the aquarium, where they were going on their date. As she took his hand, Sue remarked, "Izuku, this is a rather common first date place, I love it." Izuku glanced at Sue and grinned. As he and Sue entered the aquarium, surrounded by the abundance of the sea with fish swimming all around them and overhead, Izuku remarked, "Yeah, but that just means it's a staple of most couples if it's not broke and all that." Sue was amazed by the view in front of her, but she was even more amazed that she was holding Izuku's hand. As they entered the aquarium's center and looked at the branching corridors leading to various attractions, Sue inquired, "What made you choose the aquarium?" "Oh well, really I wanted something cool like you. You always have this placid look on your face, but I can tell you're a much deeper thinker than you let on, and that reminded me of the ocean. From where we stand it's just a lot of water for miles, but if you look a little deeper you'll see that the sea is alive with activity and beauty, and I think that's how you are." Izuku was rubbing his head. Sue shook her head when he said, "That sounds lame, doesn't it?" "I'd say that's pretty accurate, to be honest. I've never been compared to the ocean before. That makes me happy. I really do like the ocean, it's like a whole other world down there. That's one of the reasons I wanted to be sent to Selkie for my internship," Sue said while Izuku nodded. As the two walked down the hall to the octopi exhibit, stopping in front of the most deadly octopus, the blue ring octopus, Izuku remarked, "Oh yeah, he deals with incidents on the water working hand in hand with the Coast Guard. He's perfect for you and your quirk. I think you can really show your true power out there." Looking at the tiny octopod as it crawled along the floor of its tank, Izuku remarked, "It's so beautiful, and yet its venom is powerful enough to kill several people." As they proceeded to a large empty tank, Sue explained, "They are really lethal, but they come in such vibrant colors, much like poison dart frogs." Izuku remarked, This one seems empty." Sue corrected him. It's not, he's right there." Sue pointed to a corner of the tank where Izuku was staring intently, not seeing anything until the sand moved slightly, revealing that the sand was actually the octopus' camouflaged arm. Sue shrugged and Izuku said, "Whoa, that's awesome, how'd you spot that, Sue?" As they went on, Sue remarked, "I have a talent for spotting things like that." Unexpectedly, Sue asked, "So you're heading to Island, aren't you?" "Yeah, I'm excited about getting to train with David Shield. He's a genius in support technology, so I know he can help me get a better grip on my power." Izuku responded with a nod. She turned to Izuku and whispered, "I'm glad you're looking forward to it." Izuku raised an eyebrow but trailed behind Sue, saying, "I want to give you something as a going-away present." After guiding him to the restrooms and glancing back and forth, she dragged him into the women's restroom. Izuku flushed and looked around, but the room was empty. Sue then made them go into the final stall and locked the door while she sat Izuku on the toilet. Izuku harshly whispered, "Sue, what are you doing? as Sue quickly dropped to her knees and reached for his pants, undoing them. She inserted her tongue into his open fly and wrapped it around his cock, releasing it from its cloth confines. I thought I told you, Midoriya. I'm giving you a going-away present. Like I told you, I'm straightforward and I've thought about this for a while before deciding to go through with it. Izuku let out a loud moan, heard the lady's room door open, and covered his mouth while Sue's tongue twisted around his cock. She grinned seductively as she gazed up into his eyes. She swallowed her tongue and his dick into her mouth and whispered, "You should be quiet, Midoriya, we don't want to get caught." As Sue's head bobbed on his dick, Izuku held onto the bar inside the stall to prevent his voice from escaping. Sue made an effort to enjoy his flavor and aroma, but it distracted her and all she could think about was speeding up. Izuku felt his climax explode into Sue's mouth, and he threw his head back. He heard the bathroom door close and flopped against the toilet he was sitting on. He watched as Sue removed his now flaccid member, which had not a single drop of his seed on it. As Sue licked her lips, appreciating his taste completely, he asked, "TT Sue, what were you thinking?" She felt as though his cream was all over her tongue because of how thick and salty it was, even after swallowing it. She said, in a shy voice that was out of character, "Ever since Mina showed us that video of you two, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Did you not like it?" Izuku sighed and straightened up. As he watched Sue reach under her skirt and slip down her panties, ready to slide onto his lap, Izuku blushed and said, "No, it was probably the best I've had, but that list isn't extensive." She had to be stopped by Izuku. Izuku slid 2 fingers into Sue's tight pussy and said, "Sue, if that's what you want, I'm not against it, but I don't want our first to be in the bathroom of an aquarium." The sounds of her sopping cunt reverberated in the stall as he whispered, kissing Sue and dipping his finger into her folds back and forth. "But fair is fair and I owe you for before." As Izuku played her like a fiddle, Sue held onto Izuku's shoulders to stay upright while she panted against his ear and steadily drooped her tongue. Izuku! Sue groaned, her knees trembling before she passed out entirely as she collapsed into Izuku's lap, her body exploding with pleasure. As Sue shivered from the aftershocks of her orgasm, Izuku held her against him and grinned. Izuku said, "I hope that was all right." Sue retreated. Sue kissed him on the lips and said, "It was more than all right." She then got up and repositioned her underwear. Once Sue had collected himself, he walked out with Izuku right behind her, saying, "We should go while it's empty." That was unexpected, to be sure, but not disappointing at all. As he and Sue sneaked out of the bathroom and then reconnected to continue exploring the aquarium, Izuku pondered. Izuku held a bouquet of flowers for Toru as he stood in front of her house. He had visited Toru's home a few times, but this would be his first encounter with her parents. Well, this should be interesting. As the door opened and Toru emerged, he exclaimed, "I can do this, I can do this." He raised an eyebrow at the pink t-shirt and floating jeans shorts. "Toru," he said, hearing Toru's voice. Izuku shook his head when she said, "The one and only Izuku, were you expecting someone else?" He looked around and said, No, it's not that. Well, I was just expecting your parents." Toru laughed. Toru took hold of the flowers and sniffed them while glancing at Izuku. "Oh no, my parents are out of town for today. My dad is on a business trip and my mom decided to take a spa trip while he was away." Taking his hand, she dragged him into her house and said, "Thanks for the flowers, Izuku." Izuku surveyed the interior design. As Izuku gazed at her, Toru put the flowers down and said, "Oh, Izuku. I hope it's not a disappointment or anything, but I was hoping we could stay in today for our date." He said not to worry about it, saying, Yeah sure Toru, I don't mind. They could always go to the movies another day." Toru went into the kitchen and said, "Great, have a seat, Izuku. I'll get the snacks." Izuku sat down on the couch after observing that there were no pictures. He laughed as Toru entered the room carrying a plate of cookies and drinks, and she sat down between them before taking a seat next to Izuku. "Well, I guess that's to be expected. Toru's not very photogenic." Toru picked up one of the cookies and said, "I baked these myself." As Izuku flushed, Toru said, "Say ah." Holding his hands up, Izuku said, Toru, that's not necessary, I can feed myself." Toru appeared to pout. With a trembling voice that could deter a volcano from erupting, she said, "You don't want me to?" Immediately questioning his judgment for saying such a thing, Izuku said, No, it's not that I don't want you to, it's I'd much rather feed you." As her hand fell, Toru started to fidget before bending forward and taking the cookie in his. As Izuku lifted the cookie in his hand and put a hand on her cheek to guide it into her open mouth, Toru said, ah. Her mouth appeared to open. When he felt Toru's teeth snatch the cookie and drag it into her mouth, He grabbed Izuku's hand and licked the crumbs off his fingers. This caused Izuku's eyes to widen, and he spared not an inch of his index finger. He watched as his finger vanished into Toru's mouth and then reappeared with a thin layer of saliva on it. As Izuku pulled his hand away and turned to face Toru, he whispered, "So good." He swallowed and took a gulp of his juice before saying, "Well, you are the one who made them." Izuku mentioned their impending internships in an attempt to shift the conversation. Toru sighed and sat back a little. "So Toru, where are you going for your internships?" she asked. Toru looked at Izuku and then said, "Well, I'll be interning under Ms. Joke at her agency." Assuming she would see Izuku on TV next to Edgeshot or Best Jeanist, she said, "But I bet you probably will be under one of the top 10 heroes, hun?" Izuku gave a headshake. Izuku, who still finds it hard to believe he would be working as an intern for such a well-known company, replied, "No, actually, I'll be going to Island for my internship under David's shield." Toru jumped on Izuku and gave him a hug. Toru looked at Izuku, who was in awe of the display of emotion, and yelled, "No, don't say that you have to stay here, I don't want you to go." Holding her close, he said, "Toru, I am coming back, I promise," as Toru squeezed him. He looked down at Toru and said, "I'm not going to leave you, Toru, you're my girlfriend after all." He then kissed her and held her against him while she wrapped her arms around his neck before breaking off. She asked, twirling his hair with her finger, "You promise?" As Toru flushed, he said, "I promise, Toru. I love you." Izuku tilted his head to the side as Toru said, "Prove it." Izuku watched Toru get to her feet, then slowly remove her shorts to reveal her pink panties, which were then removed as well. Okay, but how?" he asked. Even though Izuku knew what was directly in front of him, his eyes widened as he stared at nothing. Taurus put her hands on her flower and spread it in front of the green-haired boy, saying, "You got to feed me a cookie, Izuku, I want to feed you mine now." Izuku looked up at Toru, who took a step closer, and swallowed. Her scent filled his nostrils, and he could feel the heat emanating from her. Leaning forward, Izuku said, "If this is what you want, Toru, who am I to say no?" His tongue moved up and down her slit, capturing Toru's pussy with his mouth sucking on her taut, puffy lips. As Izuku explored her cavern, Toru yelled and put her hands in his hair. "Ai, Izuku," she moaned, bending forward a little as her body ached from pleasure. After seeing Izuku go all out on Mina, she had wanted to give this a try. Toru never thought it would feel this good, but the expression on Mina's face said it all, and she now wanted that for herself. Izuku pulled himself from her cunt, panting heavily, and looked up at Toru, who collapsed into his lap, her breaths heavy, while Toru felt her orgasm crest over her as she held onto Izuku's green locks and her fluids dripping to the floor. Prior to noticing a big bulge pressing against her sensitive pussy, Toru remarked, "I didn't know it would feel that good." The heat of Izuku's member against her made her practically shiver. Toru repositioned herself while gazing at the throbbing beast and reaching between her legs to undo Izuku's belt, which pulled his member free. Toru bit her lip while gazing down at it, then met Izuku's eyes, who was wearing a full poker face. Izuku put a hand on her cheek and felt her nod, saying, "You don't have to if you're not ready, Toru." She reached under one of the couch pillows and took out a single condom, saying, "Thanks for that, Izuku, but no, I'm ready and have been for a while now. I always knew I wanted you to be my first." Izuku shook his head and grinned at her as Toru said, "I hope you don't mind." As he watched Toru rip the condom open, take it out, and start sliding it down his member while observing the rubber stretch down his length, Izuku remarked, "Of course not, Toru. I'm happy as long as you are." Toru rose above his member and then, just like with the condom, moved slowly down his length until she was completely encircling his cock as well. Toru groaned, sensing his whole being within her. "Why, you're so big, Izuku." She groaned as Izuku placed his hands on her hips, grinned, and then gently thrust up into her. Toru yelled at the sudden movement, and Izuku put his arms around her, drawing her close to him as he bounced her on his lap. Izuku repeatedly plunged into the invisible girl's depths, filling her with his girth, and Toru took hold of the back of Izuku's head, leaning forward to lock lips with her man. For what seemed like hours, they were in the enclosed space, their tongues moving back and forth until they had to come up for air, Izuku not faltering as he pounded her young cunt. After eating out Toru, Izuku had been on edge for a while because he could feel his dick throbbing with need. Now that he was moving faster, he drove himself into Toru and ejected himself inside the condom. Toru threw back her head and let out a strangled cry, but Izuku dove even deeper into her, forcing her into her own orgasm before the invisible girl fell forward. Her hair draped across her face, her chest heaving against Izuku, and she felt his heartbeat, as if it were thundering in her own chest right next to her own. Toru managed to pull herself off of Izuku, shivering as she felt the bulbous tip of his condom pop free of her pussy, observing the copious amount of semen inside. Sitting on the couch next to Izuku and listening to the boy laugh beside her, Toru remarked, "That was incredible." He leaned close to her and kissed her bare shoulder, giving her goosebumps as Toru giggled, saying, "Took the words right out of my mouth." She got up and gathered her clothes before guiding Izuku to the bathroom so he could dispose of the condom and shower. Toru prepared the shower and stepped aside to let Izuku in, so she was taken aback when he pulled her inside with him. "Glad you agree. You should get washed up while I take care of things in here. Don't you think we should both clean up?" As he and Toru stood beneath the showerhead, he asked, the invisible girl blushing all the while. She said in a whisper, "Okay." Ochako Uraraka, who was wearing a black tank top and running pants with a dragon scale pattern, was standing in front of her room mirror, staring at herself. She had put on her shoes and put her hair back in a ponytail before leaving her room, as her parents had already left, needing to get another early start on their ongoing construction project. She left her house and started jogging from her bottom floor apartment to the top floor of her apartment building. She had done this numerous times and it was becoming easier. She was only a little exhausted when she reached the building's roof and saw her boyfriend, Izuku Midoriya, standing in front of the sunrise. She watched him stretch as the sunlight outlined his muscles, the way they contorted under his skin showing off all that potential. It took all of her focus to remember to breathe as she walked up to him. Hearing her footsteps, Izuku turned and smiled at her. "Morning, Ochako," he said, and hearing her name spoken by him made her heart skip a beat. Her face got hot thinking this, as it did every time she thought it would ever stop bringing a smile to her face or heat to her cheeks. After losing to Bakugo, Ochako realized she needed more combat training and had decided to intern under Gunhead in the hopes of learning more about fighting. However, she didn't want to go in blind, so she went to her boyfriend and asked him to train her, and he agrees. "Hey Deku," she said with a smile as she started stretching with him. This was their routine for the week before their internships. Ochako came up from her leg stretches and turned to Izuku, who was tying a blindfold around his eyes. "What are you doing, Deku?" Izuku smiled at her after completing the blindfold fastening, and she asked. "Well, I thought I'd give you a little final test since this will be our last training session before our internships end." Before assuming his stance, he clicked the stopwatch on his wrist and said, "I'll give you anything you want if you can hit me once in 3 minutes." Ochako nodded and glanced at Izuku. "All right, Deku, I won't hold anything back." Once again, Ochako stepped forward and threw a sweep to his legs, which he avoided dancing back, but Ochako took advantage of this by stepping forward and throwing another punch, forcing Izuku to block her attack this time instead of just avoiding it. Ochako said this as she took a stance and then advanced on him slowly, trying to be as quiet as possible before striking with a straight punch to Izuku's chest as he taught her. However, it appears that was too predictable as Izuku sidestepped her attack. She recognized this movement as the tornado stance that Ojiro had told them about, but Ochako was unfazed and continued to avoid or block her attacks. However, just as time was running out, Ochako surprised Izuku by stepping forward to block his escape and slamming her palm against his stomach. Izuku then dropped into a sweep, dropping Ochako on her butt out of instinct. "Good Ochako, press your advantage," he told her as he spun around her. As he checked her for injuries, he snatched off his blindfold and said, "Sorry, Ochako. You caught me off guard and I got serious for a second." "My goodness, I thought I had you around." Izuku grinned and stroked Ochako's head, while Ochako pouted, "I was certain I had your pattern down." "You did. Your attack would have been successful if I were anyone else. You broke their rhythm. I believe I should reward you. What do you want?" Izuku, who was seated across from her, asked. When Izuku patted her head, Ochako blushed and said, "I do have one thing I want." She slid closer to Izuku, her knees pressed against his, her eyes fixed on his. I want why you?" At her request, Izuku raised an eyebrow and gave a shy smile. Ochako put her arms around Izuku's neck and leaned against him, saying, "Well, I." Before kissing Izuku, Ochako whispered, "Please, Izuku, make me yours before our internships." She felt his powerful arms pull her against him, and she could feel his heartbeat against her own as they simply collapsed into each other. "It's not so much about the sex, but I do want that too, but I just want to feel close to you," Ochako said. "Even though you're not doing anything particularly noteworthy, I can see how you and Mina interact. You just seem to have a certain vibe. As if you two are aware of each other's thoughts. I also want that connection." Ochako's face burst into red as she clung to Izuku, who petted her head before getting up and embracing her like a princess. To be honest, Ochako, I wanted to do this with you today, Izuku said. As he carried her down the stairs to her apartment, he whispered, "You've been on my mind a lot, Ochako, and I wanted to share this with you too." He let her unlock the door without putting her down, and as soon as it closed, the two kissed again, Izuku placing Ochako on her bed and standing up to gaze down at her blushing face and shy eyes. Her already striking beauty was enhanced by everything about her. His gaze was drawn to her slit and the dusting of brown hair on top of it, and Ochako blushed at this, covering her eyes, before she felt Izuku pull her hands away and stare into her eyes. "Don't look away, Ochako," she said, grabbing the hem of Izuku's shirt and slowly sliding it up and planting kisses along his abs until the shirt popped over the top of his untidy green hair. As Ochako nodded, Izuku said, "I want to see all of you, and I want you to see all of me." She reached for Izuku's shorts and slid them down to reveal the prize inside, and Izuku quickly removed her top to reveal the pink and black sports bra she was wearing. Perhaps the cool air in her room caused her nipples to harden, or perhaps it was the arousal in her veins. As she slowly reached her hand out and gently wrapped her fingers around its girth, Ochako heard Izuku moan in pleasure and swallowed, feeling the intense heat against her palm. She reached under her bed, pulled out a roll of condoms, and tore one off. She had been utterly terrified when she bought these, and even more so when she brought them home and concealed them. Ochako gasped as she saw Izuku's member pulse in front of her face. She could almost feel its desire to be inside her. Ochako took a deep breath, opened the condom, and slid it down Izuku's cock after hearing him groan again. There," she whispered as she slid back onto her bed and slowly spread her legs in front of Izuku, then used 2 fingers to spread her lower lips, revealing her depths to him. "I'm ready." Ochako panted as she wrapped her arms around Izuku's back, marveling at how broad it was as he slowly entered her pussy, pressing forward all the way until he was fully sheathed inside her. It seemed to her that he had taken everything with him, and when he thrust back into her, it was returned to her. Ochako sighed in relief, never wanting to feel that emptiness again. "I might get addicted to you, Izuku," Ochako said. "I suppose that makes us even at that point." He pushed her closer to the edge with each thrust, his rhythm steady but oh so enjoyable. "You've been on my mind since the first time I met you," he said. "Izuku, I'm going to." Ochako shouted as Izuku captured her lips with his own as she came swallowing her scream as her juices ran out along the sides of Izuku's cock. He pulled back looking at the panting form of Uraraka beneath him as he pulled free of her cunt, watching the filled tip of the condom pop free of her, letting loose another shudder through Ochako's body. Izuku pulled the condom off as he held Ochako against him, snuggling her. "I wish you could stay," Ochako whispered as Izuku shook his head. As Ochako started to nod off, he kissed her forehead and said, "One day maybe, but don't worry, I'll stay as long as I can, I promise." The final words Ochako uttered before drifting off to sleep were, "I love you, Izuku." "I love you too, Ochako," Izuku had called Mina, who was laughing in his ear as he walked to his next destination, later that day after taking a shower and spending the majority of the day packing and then double-checking everything he packed before departing on his last mission before his flight tomorrow. "My oh my, you have been quite the busy bee, haven't you, Midori?" As she lay back on her bed and listened to Izuku's apprehensive laughter, Mina remarked, "I mean, you don't even sound exhausted after playing in the bathroom with Sue and going all the way with both Toru and Ochako. You have incredible endurance." Mina bit her lip and said, "I don't think even the 6 of us can handle you." Not wanting to draw attention to himself, he whispered into his phone, "No, Mina, I think the world of all of you. I wouldn't think of going after another girl." As Izuku sighed, Mina rolled onto her side and said, "Well, whatever the case, Midori, sometimes life throws us something we don't want, but might need just keep an open mind, all right." "Mina, are you certain about this? If so, I could visit you and we could go out." After all of Mina's hard work, he felt bad and said, "I don't want you to be the only one left out. You're so ravenous that you even want a piece of me before you leave." Izuku nodded as Mina laughed sensuously and said, "Don't worry, Midori, I'm fine. Besides, this is kind of my punishment for taking such a big lead before the other girls. But I do intend to be paid in full when you get back, my dear Midori." He hung up, saying, "Okay, Mina, I'll call you when I get to Island. Bye." He was standing in front of a big house when he pressed the doorbell, and a woman with black hair and glasses, dressed in a long-sleeved shirt and a dark blue skirt, answered it. "Yes, may I assist you?" she asked, glancing up and down at Izuku. As recognition appeared in the woman's eyes, Izuku bowed before continuing, "Yes, my name is Izuku Midoriya, and I'm the class representative for Class 1A. I'm here to see Ida if he's in." "You say, Midoriya?" Izuku waved his hands and Mrs. Iida bowed, saying, "Come in, come in. Tenya has said a lot about you. Thank you for taking care of my son." He rubbed the back of his head and laughed, saying, "Oh, no need for that. Truth be told, Iida probably helps me more than I do him." Mrs. Iida grinned. "Yes. Tenya is in his room, which is the last door on the left down the hall." As Izuku went to Iida's room and knocked on the door, Iida, wearing a white t-shirt and blue shorts, opened it. "Go ahead, I'll bring you guys some snacks and refreshments," she said as she went into the kitchen. "What are you doing here, Midoriya?" Izuku looked him in the eye as Tenya asked. "I wanted to speak with you in person before I leave tomorrow to go to Island, so I won't be there to wish you all farewell on your internships. Is that okay?" Tenya glanced down at him, then moved aside to let Izuku into his room, closing the door before the two sat down on the floor across from each other. Iida's room was exactly as Izuku had expected, with everything in order and not a dust particle in sight. The shelves were crammed with books in what Izuku assumed was alphabetical order, but knowing Iida, it was probably more complicated than that. Even Iida's bed was immaculately made, though Izuku could cut himself on the narrow corners. Izuku was looking around when Tenya said solemnly, "You could have called." The greenette shook his head. "If I had, you would have assured me that there was nothing wrong and that I didn't need to come, which we both know is untrue. I know what happened to your brother is killing you, Iida, and you are my best friend. I don't have any siblings, so I can't say that I understand how you're feeling, but I do understand how angry you are at the hero killer." "How are you able to know that?" As Izuku sat there, unfazed by the outburst, Tenya yelled. "Do you recall that I told you I couldn't assist someone in front of me?" Izuku said, "That person was a thug killed by Stain right in front of me," and Iida nodded. "He didn't have to die, even though I know he was a criminal. My goal as a hero in training is to rescue everyone. I must try if there is even the slightest possibility that someone can be saved. I'm here because that's what heroes do." Just before Tenya's mother appeared with a tray of chips and drinks, Izuku pounded his fist on the floor. Mrs. Iida noticed that her son and this boy were having a very heated conversation, but before she could ask, Tenya got up and took the tray from her. He said dismissively, "Thank you, mother. I'll bring this out when we're done." Mrs. Iida then left. "You're going to go after him, Iida, and I don't want to see you hurt or killed," Tenya said, placing the tray between himself and Izuku. Izuku said, taking a glass of juice and immediately draining it, "I want to save you from yourself." "So, Izuku, what should I do to avoid getting even for my brother's attack? Am I supposed to stop there? That monster has made it impossible for him to walk?" Tenya asked, gazing into Izuku's green eyes with his own blue ones. "Yes, for the moment. In our battles, Stain employs strategies that are comparable to mine but superior due to his greater experience. I know you're probably still pursuing him, so if you do find him, keep in mind that you won't beat him, Iida. People are saved by heroes. Protecting the innocent is more important than punishing the guilty." Izuku stood up, turned to face Iida, and said, "I hope you remember that." He left Tenya in his room and walked out of the house, saying, "Please be safe and good luck on your internship." Izuku left the two Iida to reflect after saying, "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Iida. It was lovely meeting you and sorry for showing up unannounced." Izuku, in his true form, sat beside All Might on the plain as they gazed out the window at an approaching landmass. "Get ready, young Midoriya, your internship is about to begin," All Might told his copyright ga copyright. Izuku and All Might were escorted through a secret exit to avoid being surrounded by a throng of All Might fans. As they entered the island proper, they saw throngs of people strolling around, and Izuku exclaimed, "Wow, this is Island." He was wearing a blue t-shirt with a red A and a white M on the front, blue jeans, and his red shoes. He had a big duffel bag over his shoulder, and he saw a man skating, but instead of having wheels on his feet, he appeared to be suspended several inches above the ground. A woman was strolling along when she appeared to receive a call and, astonishingly, slid her sleeve back to reveal a call screen on her forearm. All Might, who was wearing a gray t-shirt, green cargo pants, and black boots, explained, "Yes, young Midoriya is a man-made island created so inventors and scientists could push the bounds of what's possible without endangering the world at large." He pointed to a car with a man in front holding up a sign with Izuku's name on it, and he decided it would be best if they went by Izuku's name because otherwise, there would have been a crowd waiting for him to arrive. "Hello All Might sir, my name is Samuel Abraham, and I am Dr. Shield's assistant," the hero and his copyright ga copyright said as they sat down inside the vehicle and gazed at the driver. Sam, an older man with blonde hair wearing a business suit, said with a smile, "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir." With a smile on his face, All Might said, "Thank you for picking us up, Samuel. We really appreciate it." "No issue, sir. I was ecstatic when David informed me that you were the person I was picking up." "I'm currently taking you to see David," Sam said. "He's at his lab, but I'm sure you could have guessed that already," as they pulled into the park. All Might and Izuku followed Sam into the multi-story building, where they rode the elevator to the top of the lab and emerged into a small lab where David Shield, a man with brown hair, glasses, and a goatee, sat at the computer. He was wearing a lab coat, but underneath it was a dark blue shirt, gray jeans, and blue sneakers. He got up smiling and greeted All Might with a pat on the back, and All Might returned the favor. "Dave, how are you? It's been too long, old friend." All Might patted the man's back and asked. David stepped back and said, "It's so good to see you, Toshi. I've been well." He then looked directly at Midoriya and said, "And you're Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you." David offered Izuku his hand, and she happily shook it. "Yes, Mr. Shield, I am, and it is a pleasure to meet you." Izuku bowed to the man and said, "Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's so amazing to be able to work with the man who created all of All Might's equipment and suits." David laughed. "Izuku, you deserve my gratitude. I've been thinking about how I could support you while I watched your time at the sports festival over and over." As David finished speaking, the elevator dinged and a blonde woman with sea blue eyes, dressed in a white short-sleeved dress shirt, gray capri pants, brown boots, and a plaid bow in her long hair, emerged. She glanced at All Might and jumped in his direction. "You are quite the interesting young man, and to a scientist that's worth its weight in gold." "Uncle Might." As All Might easily caught her and twirled her around for good measure, the girl yelled. Izuku noticed the resemblance right away when All Might put the girl on her feet and said, "Melissa, it's so good to see you. You've grown into a beautiful young woman, haven't you?" The girl gave him a big smile before standing next to David. "This is Izuku Midoriya, a student of All Might, and this is my daughter Melissa." As Melissa extended her hand to the younger boy, David said, "He's here for a week-long internship." Melissa shook hands with Izuku and said, "Nice to meet you, Izuku." Izuku added, "Likewise, Melissa." Melissa turned to David in bewilderment when Izuku's internship was brought up. "But, Dad, shouldn't you be attending a meeting with the board executives tomorrow?" As David's face dropped and he turned back to All Might, Melissa asked. "I apologize, Toshi. You and Izuku were already en route here when I received the call this morning. I didn't have time to inform you." "No, it's my fault, David. I know you're a busy man." All Might also appeared devastated by this news, believing that by arranging for David to see Izuku at the sports festival, he had finally done something teacher-like for Izuku and wanted to mentor him. All Might apologized and said, "I shouldn't have imposed on you." Izuku, for his part, just stood there, confused. He had been hoping to learn under David, but now he would have to return home empty-handed. "What if, Dad, I managed his internship?" Melissa's question caught everyone's interest. "Melissa, what are you saying?" As Melissa approached her father, David inquired. "Uncle Might and Izuku traveled this far for your assistance, and I'm fairly experienced with trying out oddities, so we can't just do nothing." Melissa looked at her father and said, "I could take over his internship and help him in your place at least until you come back." "This isn't a school assignment, Melissa." Melissa puffs out her cheeks in disappointment, then turns to face Izuku and takes both of his hands in hers. David said, rubbing his chin, "Izuku here is training to be a hero and needs more than I think you can give." "What about you, Izuku? After all, you are the client. What are your thoughts?" She begged him to say yes with her blue eyes, and Izuku looked at All Might, who was avoiding eye contact and staring off into space. "Pardon me, young Midoriya, but this is a decision you should make on your own," All Might thought as Izuku responded. "Mr. Shield, I would like to continue working as Melissa's intern. I think I'll learn more than I ever could on my own if she's even half the scientist you are." As he and Melissa felt the weighty palms of All Might on their shoulders, Izuku bowed and said, "Please let Melissa assist me." As David let out a sigh, All Might grinned and said, "Looks like you're outvoted, Dave." "Well, Melissa is correct. Izuku has the last word as the client. I'm giving Izuku's internship to you, Melissa. You can review the notes in my lab for future inspiration, and don't hesitate to give me a call if you need help." Before All Might coughed loudly, David glanced at his friend and then at Sam, Melissa, and Izuku. "Well, don't just stand there, Melissa. I'm sure Izuku would like to get started as soon as possible," he said, smiling. "I'm also interested to see how far Izuku can develop." Sam nodded as he pressed the elevator button and joined Izuku and Melissa before the door closed behind them. Why don't you take Izuku's bag to his room and then feel free to take the day off? I won't be doing any more work today, just get ready to leave in the morning. Thanks for that, Dave, said the hero, collapsing into a nearby chair as the door closed and a great puff of smoke announced All Might's transformation into his true form. David poured All Might a glass of water and handed it to the hero, who said, panting a little, I don't know how much longer I could have held that form. Your time has diminished once more. As All Might nodded, David remarked, it seems like your power is waning even more quickly than I anticipated. Before speaking, All Might took the glass and drained it all at once. Yes, this is the reason I was so desperate to bring Izuku here, he said. I became the symbol of peace in large part because of you. We would test your inventions and my abilities for days on end, and I hoped you could do the same for him. David grinned and said, I am absolutely certain that Izuku will be the next symbol of peace. He seems like a decent young man. I understand your decision to appoint him as your successor. David smiled proudly and said, I'm sorry I can't be the one to help him, but even though I was hesitant, I know Melissa will help him to the best of her abilities. I'm not concerned because I recognize a lot of you in her, Dave. What is this meeting with the Island Executive Board about? David waved his hand and All Might spoke. Oh, it's just standard procedure. Whenever I come up with something, I present it to the board and get their approval to use it publicly. I follow a slightly stricter code of conduct when it comes to my inventions because it is my responsibility as one of the faces of Island to set a good example. However, this new creation will render everything that came before it obsolete. As All Might raised an eyebrow, David grinned and said, I built it with you in mind, Toshi. However, I'm assuming you're unable to identify it? David nodded as All Might asked. David put a finger against All Might, who laughed and nodded his head. That would be correct, but don't worry, once it's been approved you'll be the first to use it. Until then, mum's the word. Sam exchanged Izuku's luggage for the room keycard and said, I'll be taking your bags to your room, Mr. Midoriya, here's your keycard. As soon as the door closed, Melissa let out a gleeful shout and jumped up and down in the elevator before turning to face Izuku. Thank you, Mr. Abraham, Izuku said as the older man left the two teenagers alone in the elevator. I'm so grateful, thank you. My dad would never have allowed me to do this without your permission, she said, shaking his hands before planting a kiss on his cheek. As Melissa composed herself, she couldn't help but smile broadly, just as Izuku couldn't help but blush. I really appreciate you going along with me, she said. Why, you're welcome. Izuku smiled and said, besides, you're helping me just as much. If you hadn't spoken up, I don't know what I would have done. As the elevator stopped on the basement floor, the boy added, I look forward to working you, Melissa. This is our underground testing facility, Izuku said. Melissa and he were in a monitoring room with computers and screens covered in notes, charts, and diagrams. These must be the notes Dad was talking about, she said, approaching a computer desk laden with numerous papers. The room was large, roughly the size of a warehouse, and it was divided into sections with various pieces of equipment residing in each. We test all sorts of things down here, but for the duration of your stay this will be our training facility, she said. Melissa held out a folded bodysuit to Izuku, saying, this is a vital suit. I'll check these over while you change into it. Izuku glanced at the suit and nodded before searching for a changing room but failing to find one. The inner lining of the suit has monitors woven in that record your blood pressure, heartbeat, etc. Where should I change, Melissa? Melissa was half reading her father's notes when Izuku asked. Melissa glanced up from the notes as Izuku returned with the vital suit in place. Oh, you can change over there. She indicated a small room in the corner. Izuku went to the changing room and undressed to his underwear before putting on the suit. As Melissa shook her head, Izuku exclaimed, I'm ready, Melissa. She had seen a lot of people in these suits, but few of them had the same figure as Izuku, or perhaps they did. And Izuku was the only one she had noticed. The boy had a striking physique. She knew he was strong, but she had no idea he was so attractive. Melissa took a tablet from the desk and led Izuku to a horizontal bar above a bench with two machines on either side. Izuku looked at the tablet, which to him appeared to be just a regular pane of glass, but as Melissa turned it on, it came alive with data. Yeah, let's get this started, she said, looking at her father's notes. He had a list of tests he was going to put Izuku through, and the first one was a strength test, of course. Izuku pointed to the tablet and said, that's amazing. Melissa nodded after taking a look at the tablet. I guess it is. Before returning to the test, Melissa demonstrated how it worked by setting the bar in a track that ended several feet above the bench, saying, this is our bench press. I work with these so much that I forget they're not that common outside the island. All we need to do is enter the desired weight, and the machines on either side will generate resistance equal to that amount in place of actual weights. Having individuals like you and Uncle Might who are capable of lifting enormous weights without overcrowding the space with such heavy objects is incredibly convenient. Izuku grinned at the futuristic setup of Ai Island and nodded while observing the machines. How about we begin with a half-ton? Izuku lay down on the bench and gripped the bar as he heard Melissa type in the weight. All right, when you're ready, she said, bringing up Izuku's vitals on her tablet. Izuku pushed upward, feeling as though the weight was barely there as he did so, making the bar clang noisily against the top of the bar's track. Melissa's eyes widened as she noted Izuku's vitals, and it seemed as though his body was being overclocked in a huge pool of energy that flooded his body, easily shattering the limiters in his brain. Melissa giggled and Izuku said, sorry, I didn't think it'd feel so light. No, that's fantastic, it means we can advance further. Let's say 3 tons this time. Melissa explained as Izuku nodded and once again pushed the bar with ease. Melissa wrote this down and steadily began increasing the weight with a final result of 60 tons, though that would have to be tested again tomorrow when he was rested to see if it was from fatigue or his outright limit. Izuku sat sweating some as Melissa brought him a towel and some water. Once you're ready we'll move over to the treadmill. Izuku drained half the bottle of water, wiped his sweaty brow, and said, sure thing, Melissa. He then got up and walked to the treadmill. They gradually increased Izuku's speed until he appeared to reach his maximum at 150 miles per hour, much like they did with the weight machine. Melissa entered the data into her tablet and remarked, you are really incredible, Izuku, I've rarely seen records like this. Melissa approached a target on the wall and said, one more test should be good for today. As she positioned herself behind a walled partition with a window to observe the testing, Melissa remarked, this is similar to the arcade game that measures how much force your punches have, so go ahead and give it your best shot, no holding back. Izuku rolled his right shoulder as he approached the target and then darkened his right arm with his snake cowl. Melissa was shocked by what she saw when Izuku threw his fist back as far as he could, stretching it across the room before slinging it forward. She had been expecting the same amazing energy readings from before when she looked down at her tablet. Izuku's punch caused the vital suit's sleeve to tear as he slammed it into the target, shattering it around his fist and sending a huge shockwave through the air. Melissa gawked as she glanced at the tablet and saw the final reading before the target was destroyed. Izuku glanced at Melissa as she hurried around the corner. As Melissa held the tablet to her face, trembling a little, Izuku said nervously, sorry, I'm so sorry, Melissa. I didn't think the meter would break and I tore the sleeve of your suit. I'm really sorry. Melissa then turned to face Izuku and displayed the amount of force Izuku applied to the target before it was destroyed. It showed 9,999 on all of them. Why, you maxed out the target's force reading, exclaimed Melissa, who checked the reading one last time before bursting into laughter. Nobody else has done that except Uncle Might. This Issa. Amazing. You're amazing, Izuku, I can't believe this. When you used that power just now it was like your entire body was overridden to something new. I have never seen anything like this before, Izuku replied with an awkward smile. Melissa nodded her head enthusiastically as Izuku asked, so that's good then? As Melissa continued to talk about her tests and other experiments she had planned for him, Izuku had a strange feeling. That's more than good, Izuku, this is groundbreaking. I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm going to spend all night coming up with a litany of tests and regimens. Does everyone around me experience this when I discuss heroes and their abilities? Izuku pondered as Melissa ended her tirade. Izuku nodded as he left the girl, changed into his old clothes, and walked back up the elevator. Melissa said, we're done for today, Izuku. Get some rest and get ready for an eye-opening internship. Also, bring your hero suit, I want to have a look at it. I'm sure it's not going to be able to keep up with you after this internship, so I'll work on it separately. No point in improving yourself if you're going into the field with faulty equipment. As the door closed, he glanced at Melissa. Like him when he was creating his hero analysis books, she was now totally engrossed in her work. Izuku didn't often feel that kind of familiar connection with someone. He felt a deeper connection with Melissa, as if they were genuinely kindred spirits, than he had with Tenya. The door next to Izuku's room opened as he was ready to enter, revealing All Might in his actual form. As Izuku opened his door with the pro-hero in tow, All Might said, hey, how'd it go with Melissa? All Might nodded proudly as Izuku remarked, she's really great, All Might. Melissa is passionate about helping me in science, it seems. I know I can learn a lot from this internship. As Izuku's face flushed, All Might cupped his chin and nodded inwardly, celebrating the good news. I knew you two would hit off. Melissa has the same passion for science and helping people that you do about being a hero. I'm sure in the future you two will have a great relationship. Izuku broke into rambling gibberish as All Might raised his hands, saying, All Might. WWWW, what are you talking about? I don't like her like that. I mean, I like her, but Whoa there kid, I wasn't saying anything like that. Just that with experience between you in the future she could be the one building your suits and support items. Just saying she's as brilliant as David is now and much more than he was at her age. I know she'll go far. All Might raised his arms and placed them onto Izuku's shoulders. Izuku grinned resolutely as All Might stated, I'll be leaving tomorrow morning back to Japan, so from here on out it's just you and Melissa. Work hard and come back stronger. Izuku shook hands with All Might and said, Of course All Might, I will get stronger. The pro went back to his room, and Izuku went to bed in anticipation of starting his training seriously. Izuku entered his room and retrieved his Mark II hero suit, which his brother Donnie had made for him. It was reportedly much more resilient than the previous one and had been altered to fit his new powers. Izuku had hoped to use this suit during his internship, which is still a possibility, but in reality, he hadn't worn it since Donnie gave it to him. He and Melissa had just returned from saying goodbye to Mr. Shield and All Might, and Melissa was excited to get back to testing, which was exactly what Izuku wanted. A small platoon of books surrounded Melissa as the young boy ran from his room to the elevator and rode it down to the testing area. As she stood up, almost toppling some of the books, her blonde head emerged from the stacks, grinning at Izuku with joy behind her glasses. Before she saw the case in his hands, she giggled awkwardly and said, Oh Izuku, I didn't expect you quite so fast, but I suppose I should have considering your tests yesterday. As Izuku approached her and made the presentation, she questioned, Is that your hero suit? Izuku apologized for severely damaging Donnie's suit, but he said shyly, Yes, my brother Donnie made it for me. Actually this is his second model, I kind of destroyed the other one during the USJ attack. Melissa opened the case as Izuku described the suit, taking note of it, and then she went rigid as her finger pointed to a tiny symbol on the suita, a turtle with a D pattern on its shell. Melissa's icy tone instantly caught Izuku's attention as she asked, You said your brother Donatello made this? Melissa clenched her teeth and clicked them together, saying, Yeah, well he's not really my brother, I was trained by his father and well, they just started calling me their little brother and it stuck. Looking at the suit, Melissa exclaimed, Donatello Hamato. Melissa turned to face Izuku, who said, Melissa D, do you know Donnie? She smiled as she took the suit out of the box and hung it against the wall. Oh yes I do, he worked under my father and was always such a show-off, but now's my chance to get the upper hand. Izuku, I'm not only going to help you improve your powers, but also improve this suit and send it back to Donatello. Izuku's laughter caught the older girl's attention, making Melissa flush. I am sorry Izuku. This is about you, not my rivalry with Donatello. She apologized, but Izuku shook his head. Donatello won't even recognize it when I'm done. Don't worry, Melissa. I'm confident Donnie will enjoy the challenge and having two brilliant minds work on my suit. Izuku said, Thank you, that's more amazing than I could have ever imagined. Melissa blushed and ran a hand through her hair. Do you believe that I am a genius? Izuku nodded as she asked. How could I not? Is it a peculiarity of yours that you can accomplish so much with just your thoughts? Melissa shook her head in response to his question. Izuku looked at Melissa, who was sitting at the computer as if nothing had happened, and said, I'm quirkless actually. I wasn't born with a quirk, but with science I can still help people and make their lives better, Izuku said. If you set your mind to it, you can achieve anything. At any rate, that's what I think. Melissa remarked as Izuku stood next to her. She gazed up into his green eyes and was struck with astonishment. I understand your feelings, Melissa. Izuku remarked as he watched tears well up in Melissa's eyes. Melissa DD, did I say something to hurt your feelings? I got my quirk really late in life, so up until that point I was quirkless, watching people do incredible things, while I struggled along, but like you I persevered and trained, not giving up on my dream, and now here we are, Melissa, working toward our dreams. I'm very sorry. Melissa grinned as Izuku stumbled, searching for a tissue or something. No, Izuku, you didn't. You just have a way with words. Melissa wiped her eyes and put on her glasses, saying, Well, enough of that, let's get down to business. If being a hero doesn't work out, you should become a motivational speaker. You'll make a killing. What specifically do you want to concentrate on during this internship, Izuku? I should have asked you this yesterday. Izuku was standing in front of Melissa when she asked, taking out her tablet again. My nickname for my red full cowl is Snakehood, so if I had to pick one, it would be that. It's the one with which I've trained the least. Before the sports festival, All Might and I took a brief crash course, but that was it. I know I can do so much more with it, but I can use it up close and for moderate maneuverability. Izuku told Melissa, who had taken notes during his explanation. I used to be able to shoot my fists out to a distance when I fought Nomu, but now if I do that, I can't keep up and end up missing my target. My fist is moving too fast for me to control or direct it. I understand. Your fist was moving far faster than the human eye in the video of your punch yesterday, so it's understandable why you lack control. Additionally, your nerve impulses have a longer travel time when your arm is stretched like that. Would you like to explore anything else? Melissa turned to her tablet and scratched her head, saying, I'd prefer that we work on very few points of interest because we only have a week, but I'll try my best to accommodate all your concerns. No, aside from increasing my strength output, that's the only thing that comes to mind. Izuku recited a list of All Might's strength accomplishments, saying, I've seen All Might lift a lot more, but 60 tons is a lot. As she guided him from the old training rooms to another area of the underground floor, she remarked, I might have something that can help. Don't worry Izuku, they're loaded with rubber bullets, so you won't be killed, but probably bruised, Izuku said, swallowing at the sight of the large room with what looked like gun turrets on the walls and ceiling. Izuku cupped his chin and nodded when Melissa told him, this area will help you get used to fast-moving objects by learning how to dodge bullets. You'll be better primed to handle your speedy punches. I understand. It will help me keep control of my own body if I can learn to recognize and respond to gunfire. Let's do it, Melissa, Izuku said as he entered the room and heard it close behind him. Melissa then activated the machine, setting the number of turrets that would be in operation and their firing rate. 420 feet per second ought to be adequate. Izuku, I'm going to start her up in 3, 2, 1. Melissa turned on the machine and the turrets came to life before zeroing in on Izuku and opening fire. Izuku activated his full cowl and began to move only to feel several thuds across his body as he began moving. For a solid minute Izuku was pummeled by the rubber projectiles before Melissa shut the room down. Izuku rubbed his shoulders and arms. Guess that was too fast, hun. With sympathy for the boy who shook his head, Melissa said. After rolling his shoulders and stretching, Izuku said, I just need to get used to it, that's all. I think this is a great idea, Melissa. He then kicked his shoes and shirt to the far corner of the room and threw his shirt on top of them, saying, Start it up again please, Melissa. Izuku rolled his neck and assumed a stance, and Melissa looked at the boy's excited face, which was full of confidence. She had to admit that look made her feel something. All right. As Izuku persevered and dodged around the room while being shot with rubber bullets, she said, He's really something else. She then went outside and restarted the machine. As the door opened and Melissa entered carrying a big bottle of water, Izuku collapsed to the ground, his chest heaving. I think that's enough for now, Izuku. You've made significant progress, Izuku said. Your dodge rate has increased to a solid 20% since we started this training. Izuku sat up, hissing a little as he rubbed the series of welts across his body, Melissa said, lifting her tablet to show him the data and facts supporting her claim. Izuku tried to stand up, but Melissa pulled him back to his sitting position. I can do better, Melissa, go ahead and start it up again. Oh, that's it for today. You've worked for hours, and now you deserve a rest and a bite to eat. Izuku barely had time to grab his shoes and shirt, which he hurriedly put on as he was pulled behind Melissa, before she pulled him to his feet and toward the door. Where are we going, Melissa? As they ascended in the elevator, Izuku inquired. The secret to success, according to my dad, is striking a balance between work and play. As they reached the ground floor and emerged into the daylight of Island, Melissa said, You've worked hard, so now it's time to play around. Izuku covered his eyes as they acclimatized to the outside light, and she led him down the sidewalk, saying, Island may be a place for science, but it's also good for a vacation. Izuku looked down at the spot where Melissa held his arm against her body, certain that she had done so to prevent him from returning to the gun chamber, but now she was walking side by side, and he didn't want to make things awkward when she was going through all of this for him, so he took a breath and put his arm around hers. Melissa pulled Izuku into the amusement park and said, Come on, let's have some fun. Izuku didn't see any obvious signs of it, if that's okay. What should we try first? Melissa asked, glancing at Izuku, who then glanced around and noticed the almighty ride, a roller coaster. What about that one? Izuku asked, pointing to it as Melissa nodded excitedly, and the two got in line for the ride, making it to the front and being seated in their own red, white and blue car of the coaster with the safety bars made to look like All Might's signature hair. The ride began moving forward as they began their ascension only to go down the first drop. Izuku threw his hands in the air as he saw Melissa do the same. The car went for a loop-de-loop before corkscrewing out of it up the next incline and then down before curving around back to the entrance. As the car came to a stop, All Might's voice rang out of the PA system. "You are here." As he got up to assist Melissa out of the car, Izuku grinned and she fell against him, still feeling lightheaded, and the two of them fell to the ground, Melissa's breast smothering the young man. As she carefully removed herself from Izuku, who was blushing profusely, Melissa's eyes widened and then she burst out laughing. "Izuku, the expression on your face was priceless." "I'm flattered though, really," Melissa said, wiping a tear from her eye as she gazed at the green-haired boy. She then petted his head and looked around, finding another activity they could do. "Oh, what about that?" Melissa pointed to a stone cliff that rose out of an arena, which was known as Villain Mountain. A woman with brown hair and brown eyes approached the two. She was wearing a pink shirt that was open to show a navy crop top, a pink skirt, and a pink star painted on her left cheek. Hi there, want to see how good you were at Villain Mountain?" With a loud voice that could be heard throughout the plaza, she asked. Izuku glanced at Melissa before the girl caught his eye once more. "Don't worry, everything is very easy. All you need to do is defeat the robot villains and ascend to the top. Your time will be announced to the audience after we have timed you." She pointed to Melissa, who flushed as Izuku started to stutter, and said, "Come on, impress your girlfriend with your speed and skills." "I mean that she's not Maya." Melissa pushed Izuku in the direction of the girl, who took his hand and escorted him to the starting point before he could finish. "Come on, Izuku. This is your opportunity to see how far you've come. Go for it. Even though I know that numbers on a screen don't mean much if you can't see the results of your hard work," Melissa said, dismissing him. "All right, begin counting down. 1, 2, 3. Go." He activated his red cowl after realizing he had no other option and that Melissa was correct. "Full cowl. Snake style." He uttered those words as his hair fluttered on his head and red steam like energy arced away from him before Izuku blasted forward, noticing a villain to his left and taking a moment to aim and dial down his power so he could actually see what he was doing. "I think 50% should be controllable." Izuku threw his fist forward, and although it was difficult, he felt as though he had more control over it, causing it to pierce the enemy's chest instead of severing its head off as he had intended. He then whipped his leg out, slicing the head off a nearby robot, and proceeded upward, destroying robots at a blinding pace until he reached the top of the cliff, black smoke billowing around him as his time was calculated. A total of 10 seconds passed. Izuku leapt down from the cliff as Melissa ran up to embrace him. Amplifier announced, shocked, not expecting such an amazing time from some kid. As Izuku rubbed the back of his head, Melissa remarked, "See, I told you, you were improving." Amplifier approached them, and Izuku responded, "Yeah, I guess you're right, Melissa. Thanks for that, kid. That was truly something." As she left to the assembling crowd, Amplifier said, "Thank you. I needed something dazzling to get people interested, and nothing gets people excited more than beating a record. Now, what ought we to do?" Melissa held a finger to Izuku's chin as she asked. As she led Izuku back to the lab and then up the elevator to the second-floor entrance into a living room, she said, "Let's do dinner. My dad and I stay here, but we don't really stay here because we spend most of our time and nights in the lab." As Melissa went into the kitchen to grab an apron, Izuku strolled around the living room, taking in the family photos that adorned the walls. He saw several of Melissa growing up and accepting various rewards, and in one he even saw a younger Donatello. Other pictures showed a younger All Might. Izuku grinned at these rare pictures of All Might's personal life, which reminded him of something. He knew everything about All Might's career and professional life, but he knew very little about the man's personal life. Izuku said, "I should really ask him about that." His phone rang in his pocket, and when he took it out, a picture of Mina appeared on the screen. Izuku answered, then heard Mina yell, "When you got here yesterday, Midori, you were meant to give me a call. I have been sitting here feeling very anxious." Izuku attempted to soothe the furious Mina as she yelled in his ear. "Sorry, Mina. I'm fine. I met with Professor Shield yesterday, and he informed me that he was unable to complete my internship. Fortunately, his daughter Melissa took over." Mina arched a brow and smiled as Izuku explained, "She really helped me out there. After that I jumped into some tests and totally forgot to call you." "Oh, your internship was offered by Professor Shield's daughter? You would never have sprung her with that Midori charm, would you?" As Izuku sputtered on his end, Mina asked with a sly smile. No. Melissa is a friend of mine, so I would never consider doing anything similar. She works hard, is a true genius, has a strong enthusiasm for science, and She's attractive, isn't she? Poor Midori, you don't even realize that you've fallen for this girl, Mina said, interrupting Izuku's stream of praise. Mina shook her head. No, she isn't. I mean, she's attractive, but that wasn't my point. Stop making fun of me, Mina. Mina giggled in Izuku's ear as he blushed. Yes, Izuku, you've fallen for her, Mina said. I can't even see you and I know, and you know what, I think you should go for it. Izuku was stunned, and his mind froze as he did his best to comprehend the foreign language Mina had just used. What do you mean by, go for it? As Mina sighed in his ear, he exclaimed, stunned by what she had said. Is this a test to see if I'll be faithful to her and the other girls? He asked. Don't try to analyze this, Izuku. What I said was true. You should go for it if you feel this way about this Melissa girl, who you clearly like. Knowing you, she is most likely smitten with you as well, and you will still have us even if she is ill. Izuku, Mina reassured him, I told you that your happiness is our happiness, and if that means adding one more girl to the mix, that's fine with me. I mean, what about the others? Is it really okay? Mina shrugged and Izuku asked. We all knew this could happen, but you're simply too irresistible, and you're hundreds of miles away. What will they do? Izuku laughed at Mina's brash remark as she asked. Izuku's husky voice sent a chill down Mina's spine as he said, Thanks Mina, I'm going to have to pay you back double when I get back. I'm excited about it regardless of whether it's a threat or a reward. Mina hung up her legs and rubbed them together before huffing, Goodbye, Midori. Why did he have to make me feel so hot and bothered? She said as she removed her underwear. Izuku smiled as he hung up the phone and turned to face Melissa, who was blushing. Melissa. As Melissa placed 2 pasta plates down, Izuku exclaimed in shock. Was that a home-based friend? Izuku sat down cautiously, unsure of what she had heard, and Melissa asked. Yeah, it was. She is a close friend and classmate of mine. Melissa gave an awkward laugh as Izuku rubbed the back of his head and said, I told her I'd call when I got here and forgot, so she called to chew me out. Izuku, you must exercise caution. That's what girls worry about. I was concerned about my dad's friendship with the world's greatest hero, All Might. I can appreciate your friend's worry because I was worried that he might be the target of villains, but he never seemed to consider it, even though it was all I could think about. After Melissa explained what Mina might have been going through, Izuku vowed to make up for his guilt about causing her anxiety. The first step in doing so was to heed Mina's advice. Thanks for today, Melissa. You taking me out and distracting me from my training was really helpful because I'm a little obsessed with it. Izuku put a hand on Melissa's and said, To me, Melissa, you are the true hero. I felt like I was telling Mina how much I appreciate you taking over my internship. One of the reasons I've grown to like you so much is that you accomplish more without a quirk than I could ever hope to do with one. However, there are some things about me that I must share with you. Melissa briefly kissed Izuku, but it was chaste. Looking into his green eyes, Melissa said, Stop right there, Izuku. I feel the same way, but we can't act on it yet, she said. After we've done that, I want us to continue focusing on how the internship will make you stronger and better. Izuku stared at Melissa for a moment before nodding and picking up his pasta. The two ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Izuku got up and put his plate in the sink, followed by Melissa, who then followed him to the door. I will listen to everything, but for right now let's just leave it at this, she said, leaning back with a smile as she picked up her plate. Before going to the elevator, Izuku kissed Melissa on the cheek and said, See you tomorrow, Melissa. Melissa stood at her door and watched Izuku until the elevator closed, at which point she closed it and slid down it, her mind racing with all sorts of strange emotions. Knowing she wouldn't be able to finish any work, Melissa chose to turn in early, but she couldn't sleep for hours after lying in bed. She kept thinking about Izuku with that smile, those brilliant green eyes, but most importantly, what had he been about to tell her and why had she stopped him? I understand why I stopped him. I didn't want our relationship to change. She sat up in her nightshirt, put her head on her knees, and slid out of bed, saying, I'm a coward. If I'm not going to sleep, I might as well finish some work, she said. I'll go down to the lab and work on Izuku's suit. She put on some sweatpants and sandals and headed down to the lab, where she was surprised to see that someone was already Tharia Izuku, according to the shoes and shirt outside the bullet chamber. Melissa approached the chamber door and saw that the muzzle velocity had been slightly increased, and based on the numbers, Izuku's dodge rate had also increased. For a brief moment, she watched Izuku dart around the room. He was so focused that she didn't think he would notice her, even if she opened the door and yelled at him. I need to get better sooner so I can be honest with Melissa, she said. I don't want her to wait any longer than absolutely necessary. As he bounced around the room, Izuku said through gritted teeth, and Melissa covered her mouth, turning away from the door as tears threatened to spill out. She hurriedly grabbed Izuku's suit and rode the elevator up to her room, wiping the tears from her eyes, which now had a determined glint. All right, Izuku, if you're going to work hard for me, I'll do the same. I won't give up on you because you're the man I love. I don't care what you think.
So this was it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.